Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Joining me today in the studio is Jamie Clossick. Now, many of you will know Jamie as the host of the Carp Cast, the UK's first ever UK carp fishing podcast, which he founded with Mark Watson. But prior to all of this, he was probably best known for catching some of the country's most exclusive and difficult to catch carp. This all started back on Elstow Pit number 2, where he landed both the mother and the twin. This set in motion a string of successful catches for Jamie, including the 2 Tatton Park Commons, Mr. Angry from the Manchester Park Lake, and St Ives Lagoons, the Fat Lady at nearly £60. Now, his biggest personal angling accomplishment came on a 90-acre Shropshire water known as the Colemere, where he hooked 5 of only the 7 carp in the lake. The highlight of this being the never-before-caught Banana Common. Now, away from his fishing, Jamie has been a professional musician. He's a very, very good poker player. He was one of the men responsible for creating the Northern Angling Show, and he also runs Balkan Fishing Adventures. So a super interesting guy, lots to look forward to on this podcast. Hope you enjoy the show.
I've naturally been like that. I've always been interested in things and I get obsessed by it, you know, whether it was learning guitar when I was 13, 14 years old. It's got to a point of 8 hours a day, you know, going to the Guitar Institute, and obviously you've had guitarists on here like Adrian Smith are pretty good, you know. But I could play everything he could play back in the day. Like, I'm not saying I could invent it like the tracks he did, but I played Phantom of the Opera at school assembly when I was like 14 years old. Me and my pal would learn it and had to play it in assembly, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's an instrumental Iron Maiden track, a very famous one off the first album. But
I mean, that stuff's quite technical as well, isn't it?
I mean, it's not technical if you go deeper into the realms of Steve Vai and Yngwie Malmsteen, stuff like that. The Iron Maiden,
but there's a lot of different arrangements in one song as well, aren't there?
Yeah, they're very harmonic. It's melodic. You know, the harmony is always great. And I mean, Steve Harris. If we're going to go down this route, Steve Harris was the genius. The bass player writes 80% of the stuff, and I think that the other guys in the band only get songs on albums so they don't leave, you know.
I mean, Adrian, I didn't realise how many songs Adrian had actually written for him, though. He's more of their commercial hit maker. He tends to write their more commercial stuff. Have you heard his latest stuff?
I've heard clips of it, of his new act, because they do seem to be hocking it on Facebook quite a bit. I've had a little look, but I've not sort of listened to it in depth. I was a rocker in the 80s. It was 90s. I was touring Europe in like a poppy sort of charty band, and then it was my music for pleasure was sort of electronic music, dance music and stuff. So house music's been like a heartbeat to me for the last sort of 25, 30 years, I would say, from the illegal raves in the early 90s through to sort of now. Don't do as much DJing now as I used to. It was a job for 30 years, from touring sort of 250 gigs a year in the band for 7 years, and then DJing residencies sort of everywhere from Ibiza to every city centre in the north, you know, Manchester, Liverpool.
Is this where this like technical interest in equipment and everything comes from as well then?
Yeah, I've always been like that. Even I'd buy a video player, you know, and I remember in my early 20s, and I'd have the manual out, and I'd wanted to know what every button did. If there was a feature that video player did that I didn't know, like, I was annoyed. I couldn't settle. And I'm the opposite now. I'm literally manual in the bin. It's like, how do I do what I need to do? You know, I'll click this, click that, and find, right, that works. And I kind of miss having that. Maybe it's old age that's took it away, but I kind of miss having that like geekiness, you know. It was people have said in the past my geekiness is like one of my best sort of attributes, because I like getting stuck into stuff. But it's a man thing, isn't it? We're interested in things like whether it be technology, video cameras, whatever. But I've always produced music, and I was at the forefront. We were talking with Toby before about sort of the earliest Apple Macs. I think my first Mac was nearly 25 years. Probably more than 25 years actually, and it was a 1 gig sort of tower Mac. I think they called them Power PCs then, and And there was no audio then on computers. It was just MIDI. You used to run Cubase on it. And I had the very first computer, but the thing is, stuff's so technical now, you can't know the ins and outs of everything. I mean, you've got a MacBook in front of you.
Well, it's in front of you, it's not actually.
Yeah, but it doesn't come with any instructions. Like stuff doesn't come with.
You're just expected to know it now, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah. Or it's meant to be kind of user friendly, where you can like learn as you go. You can click it and find stuff. I mean, I noticed you've got an Ableton little pad over there.
Yeah, they're wicked.
You should have heard it before. Jamie was asking me all these technical questions before. So what's
Yeah, but like Ableton's a classic example. So I'm a purist. I use Pro Tools, which basically works how it's audio software, DAW as they call it. It works how a traditional studio works. You have to route stuff kind of the long way, kind of manually. Yeah, and Ableton's made it so that when there was there's a podcast boom now, there was a DJ boom sort of 10-15 years ago where everybody was getting a DJ set up for Christmas, and a couple of decks, and then Ableton was kind of a piece of software that you didn't have to know about recording studios or anything to be able to use it, and the purists like me were like, Ableton, and I wish I'd learned Ableton now. Like, it's so much easier to do the stuff that I do. Not that I make that much music anymore, but it's always there in the background. You're just kind of planning to do it, but I don't know. I've still got that interest, but I think either my brain's just not capable of learning it all anymore, or stuff's just too complicated for anybody to actually just be able to go through a manual and like learn the ins and outs of everything. So I think they make stuff user friendly, don't they? So as you go, you keep going, I wonder if I click that should do that, and generally that's how Macs work. Like, they're logical. So
I had this Boss drum machine back in like the mid-90s, and I never got the hang of working that.
It's probably the same one I had. I reckon I had one of them.
I gave it to another band member, and he just fiddled a few switches and it was working straight away. But I don't know, you need that sort of mindset for that sort of thing. I think I was more interested in the musical side of it rather than the programming side of it.
I think with anything, like, it's quite a good life lesson. A lot of the sort of psychologists and people say this. It's like, if you pick one thing and just focus on that, get really good at it, like, you're surprised how far you can go in anything, whether it be learning guitar or learning how to program drums or whatever it is. Like, if you just stick to one thing and really just test yourself, see how far you can go with it, you'd be very, very surprised. But I go through cycles, like, the reason why I got pretty good at fishing, I don't claim to be good now, but there was a period in the, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, I was just addicted to it. I was not paying my mortgage to drive 200 and something miles to Elstow to bait up, not even the weeks that I couldn't fish. I'd literally not pay bills, like, because I was that keen. And I think if I hadn't ever been that keen about fishing, we wouldn't be sat here having a conversation about fishing, and it's the same thing. Like, I wouldn't have had a career in music if I hadn't have got really geeky about it. But at the age I am now, I'm like 48, I don't know if I've got that in me to actually focus and get stuck into something, in depth. I want to learn film production, what's the correct word? Filmography.
Videography.
I say videography. It's like, and I'm looking at the equipment, and I'm buying little bits, and I'm improving the mics and sort of learning some of the shots. I'm like, do I have the aptitude that I used to have? Well, I'd have been all over it, 25 years ago. And
Toby's like that. Anyway, I better introduce you to the show. Jamie Clossick, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
Have we actually been recording?
We've been recording, yeah. This is how the shows start.
We're 8 minutes in already.
He doesn't watch too many of these,
No,
I
I watched the highlights, I watched the clips.
We've got a highlights show, have we?
Don't be offended. I don't watch my own podcasts. If Mark, who's the other guy in the Carp Cast, if he records a guest, I've never heard that interview to this day.
Really?
No, and vice versa.
Why is that then?
I don't know. I don't read magazines. Like, I've watched almost zero YouTube content on fishing generally. I don't know.
It's awkward looking at yourself as well, isn't it? Or listening
I don't
to
mind
yourself.
that. I've spoken on a microphone for a job for 30 odd years, and what we were talking about before with the headphones, like hearing your voice through it, and it sounded really weird. Like I was talking to 1,000 people, 5 nights a week, like every night through a huge PA system. So you get used to that. It's not that side of it that bothers me. I don't know. I've never been so into fishing. It's one of them things that I've done by myself, and if I've had regular breaks, discovered girls or Ibiza or something, and I don't really go fishing much for a year or two, and then when I go back I'm like a beginner again. I've forgotten how to tie the knots and to tie the rigs, and then I might have a quick look at something, a scan at a magazine, and just like refresh almost, and then it comes second nature, and then I do it myself. Fishing's, I don't know. I've never. Is
it just more the fishing side of it, the practical fishing side of it, rather than everything else?
I've never found it interesting watching other people fish. I mean, I've been fortunate that I've fished on lakes with some of the top anglers. A lot of the Korda guys. I was quite close with Darryl for a few years. Ali used to come to my gigs when I had residencies in Liverpool and Manchester and Blackpool. Ali used to come every week. Like he was a smart little cookie. Ali. I was too busy working to actually take all the requests and stuff, and it's usually girls, 80% girls that come and ask for the request, and Ali used to be there with a notepad like she wants this, just schmoozing. He's married now, so I'll stop, but
I know he appreciated it. What was he at university up there, or was he
he actually lived up there. His parents live near Northwich, and he used to come regularly at sort of weekends. I guess he was single at the time, and it was before he got the job with Korda, obviously. He used to sell rear projection TVs to Wayne Rooney, I think, back then. I think he used his Sky Sports contacts when he did some sort of apprenticeship or something there, didn't he? I believe. And so this is after that, but he was working in sales. And we used to go out. He used to only take me to like the members clubs in Manchester. Circle Club he used to like going to, and I've got a few stories, but we'll save them for another day.
Where did you meet him then? Were you fishing on a same lakes or something?
How did I become friends with Ali? I'm not really sure. I know I remember a BCAC in the very early days of BCAC fished opposite me on one lake, so it could have been after that. We got pretty chatty, but I think we knew each other. I don't really. That's a good question. After I see him, I can't remember when we actually, become friends outside of chatting on a fishing lake or something. I'm not really sure.
But you're quite like-minded in some respects as well, aren't you?
I'm guessing. Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for Ali. He became what he wanted to be. Is probably the best way I describe it, and obviously I might see things different to how he sees himself, but I remember one time in the Circle Club he'd been with me telling me how broke he was, and he's gone to the Circle Club and he's flashing the credit card around ordering bottles of champagne. I'm like, you just told me you're broke, like what you doing? Like, I'll just have a beer. And he's like, no, when you come in here you've got to be the part, and him being the part got him the part. He's an extremely successful guy. What I think we'll look back in fishing history, back at Ali, as one of the big success stories, because even your Terry Hearns might be a brilliant angler, they probably don't live as comfortable a life as Ali does these days, I reckon. And
but you've got to convince yourself that you can be that person in the first place.
He was always that. If he was going to sell something, he was going to sell it to the footballers. He was never going to go in at an entry level. It was always going to be at sort of quite a high level. And I was quite close with him around the time he got the job with Korda and then moved down south. And he was made for this job, this company, this everything. He put himself in the right position, and he took a marketing degree into fishing, which hadn't been done before. Fishing was, most of the fishing companies were fishermen, not businessmen. And Korda kind of flew, didn't they, when Ali sort of got involved on the marketing side of it. So. But the point was I was friends with quite a lot of good anglers at the time, so if I wanted to learn something about fishing or discuss fishing, like I talked with Darryl, or I was friends with Terry Hearn for a couple of years. We were exchange phone calls and stuff, and many sort of really good anglers. So watching a YouTube video, YouTube didn't really exist then for angling, but watching that or reading a magazine or something technical, it wasn't me. I had no interest in kind of doing that. Yet for other stuff, maybe I would. I don't know why I've never been bothered for fishing. I don't know.
But I mean, it's ironic as well because you with the podcasting and stuff like that, it's all about conversation, isn't it? And it's the raw stuff rather than kind of the extra media stuff that seems to go with everything nowadays.
Yeah, it's funny watching it evolve. The way fishing's gone, magazines are kind of vanished. Things like this, films. You can make a living now producing fishing content like it didn't exist 5 years ago. I would say.
I think it's getting harder though. There's a lot of digital stuff coming out now as well, isn't there? And
it's the same with anything. I mean, would you advise somebody? I was listening to Joe Rogan talking about this yesterday. Actually, would you advise somebody to start a podcast? Now, there's 1.9 million podcasts on the Apple directory.
Mate, that's a
currently.
lot, isn't it?
It's gone up from 1 million 5 months ago, I think.
Wow.
1.9 million podcasts. Is it a good time to start a podcast? Well, if you're in a niche, there's definitely space within the fishing industry and probably some other niche industries.
But you'd be pretty stupid to dismiss it, though, wouldn't you?
As a hobby, but like anyone who's successful at anything is the exception to the rule. Generally, you think how many people produce a track on Ableton every day of the week. Every kid in his bedroom to an experienced performer. You think how many songs are made on a daily basis, and then how many the general public ever get to hear. What is it, 0.00001% or something of people? Like anything successful is the exception to the rule, and I think what we just said about Ali is a perfect example. If you believe in something and it's a part of you and you feel you've got something to offer and be good at it, you should just do it and do it as hard as you can. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before. Pick one thing and really, really go for it, to the best of your ability, and you'd be surprised what comes out of it. I've always had that mentality of anything I do, I can get near the top. And I haven't really got near the top on anything, but if you aim there and then you end up 3/4 of the way or better than average of for most things, then
but I mean, focusing your energy, I mean, it sounds like a simple thing to do, isn't it? Put all your efforts into one thing, but it's like survival of the fittest, that as well, isn't it? Because it's like, how long are you prepared to actually stick with something for before you get fed up with it and you want to try something else?
Well, I'll give you a good example if we're going to not do yours and my normal conversations, which is just complete philosophy. But if I try and bring it back to fishing a little, Colemere, which is a lake I know you know about now. We've had a few conversations about it. Well, this was a lake in Shropshire. I'd fished. We might as well do the full story now.
Yeah, well, okay.
I'd fished Elstow. It was the first big step up in lakes. Like, I'd always been a keen angler, and I always used to catch more than me mates. Even when I didn't really know what I was doing. When you look back now, and I was fishing pre-hair rig. I mean, people knew about it, but not me. In like the very early 80s and stuff. I remember the difference that made from putting your luncheon meat sort of inside the hook inside the lunch meat with a bit of grass on the back, and then to using the hair. I was like, kind of went all through that era of it evolving, but I never considered myself technical or a good angler, but I had some natural ability to catch more than my mates, but I remember vividly thinking we went to when there was the old close season, the reservoirs, which were like council owned down in Devon and Cornwall, they were open in the close seasons. So I always used to drive down there at Easter.
Yeah.
Try and get there a week before, beat the crowds. And I'd fished this lake, Lower Tamar it's called. I'd fished there a couple of times with parents on holidays. They used to stay in Bude, and they'd always find, when I was a kid, they'd always find somewhere for me to go fishing, somewhere for my sister to go horse riding, like near, whatever, caravan park or whatever we could stay on. Remember, they dropped me off at this lake. Kind of learned the lake. There was a sunken riverbed that ran across the lake, because I was that kid that went and spoke to everybody. I was in everyone's swim, finding the info. Then I used to do a lap of the lake and actually talk to everybody just for information. So, because again, geeky, just trying to like find everything I could out, catch more than everyone else, and not that I was trying to. It wasn't a competition. I wasn't trying to beat everyone else. I just wanted to do well. Anyway, so I've got all this knowledge. I've gone back with my mate on Easter holidays. He drove, and I was still too young then, so I was probably 16 or something. And I'm telling him about this riverbed. We've got to be in these swims. This riverbed is 40, 50 yards out or whatever. And I was catching 6 fish to his 1. He caught the biggest fish in the lake and the second biggest in the lake. And he's not listening to anything that I'm telling him. He's getting his rod and just slinging it down the margin or something. He caught the biggest fish in the lake. And I'm like, I remember having a realization that, like, it's not a coincidence he's catching 1 to my 6, but it's a big one. And I realized at the time that, like, I know I can catch fish pretty much every lake I go to now. I want to catch the big ones and not the general ones. So when I joined Elstow too, it was like a big step up. I'd never fished a low stock lake before, you know, where you're meant to not catch. I think it was very inhospitable. It's like 35 acres, maybe 17 fish there was in there at the time, but 2 really big ones. The mother, which was a scraper 40, again Terry Ernard was sort of targeting that fish. He'd actually pulled off there, it hadn't been out for a couple of years, and he thought it was dead because it regularly went missing, that fish. And then the backup fish, the twin, had also gone 40 pound as well. And it was like it was kind of a huge step up for me. It was, I think, I blanked 23 nights before I had my first bite. First fish I landed was the mother, which was like the hardest one out the 2. So
how did you approach it in the first place then? If Terry Hearn's not fishing,
I didn't
dismissing it, and
this was the point I'm getting to about kind of the motivation. So I'm not somebody who's going to give up at the first hurdle, the second hurdle. In fact, I'll probably go way too far before I should have, before it's probably sensible to give up on anything. I'll like exhaust it before I realise, okay, so I'm flogging a dead horse here. So that is a little bit of inbuilt competitive nature, I think.
So what made you? So Terry was thinking that the mother wasn't in there possibly anymore.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure he lost it on his last session, and I think I've spoke with him about it. He believes that now, and a couple of other people, Ed Bettridge, who knew the lake really well, like knew that fish really well, and he almost certainly lost it. But why did you have so much conviction though? After Terry left, my friend caught it, Roger Bacon, so I knew it was still in there. But again, I think it regularly used to go 2 years without getting caught. It did actually get caught in the previous year to me joining it, so it was a viable target, but it was a once a year, once every 2 year fish. I went on there kind of, naive, sort of young. It kicked me in the balls a little bit. I think I did 23 nights, something, as I said. It's a long time to go doing 3 nights a week without... I remember sitting there with...
Sorry for the people that are listening to it. So how big is the lake? And
about 35 acres, 17 carp, very deep as well. I'd never come across, fishing in 20, 25, 30 foot, which... It just felt wrong, fishing sort of lakes average of 7-8 foot deep.
What have you learned from fishing deep lakes as a result of that?
It makes no difference to the carp. Like, everything's relative to that lake. So you take a lake like Bundy's Pit, which is sort of 50, 60 foot deep all over and 80 foot deep in places. I've watched birds dive in and picking up boilies in 60 foot. Like, they've just acclimatized to it. So obviously the fish do the same. So, like, if you're casting out, normally if we look for a good feature, like we're pulling up the back of a bar or something, and it might be 8 foot deep, we find a bar that comes up to 5 foot, it's like, what an incredible feature, it's a really solid feature. If you're fishing in 35 foot and you pull up a bar that comes up to 30 foot, for some reason it doesn't feel like a significant feature, but it's exactly the same. And we know fish, they use the bars, they use feature, they use things underwater as basically like roundabouts or thoroughfares. Like, it's just they use it to navigate the lake. And this is why, one thing I learned when I was young is always fish to a feature, near a feature. The channels between the bars, everything, they're just like motorways to the fish. They're just points of reference when they're swimming about a big open lake. And obviously the margins as well. The margins on a deep lake are like the best feature on the lake. Like, there is no feature bigger than the margins if it drops off quickly, So just getting my head around that, there were 3 bars that run through the centre of Pit 2. That are in 30 odd foot of water, and they come up 4 or 5 foot, and it was like, that's a significant feature, even though it didn't feel like it, because you're still popping your marker up 2 foot lengths, like, and you come, it's like 28 foot, 30 foot, 32. Oh, there it is.
It's a lot of work.
But it's 36 around it. Like, it's a pretty definite feature, and with it being a clay pit, it's got deeper over the years, so it never used to be that deep. So they were probably bars that didn't come far below the surface originally.
And so Elstow too was like the little brother of Elstow one, would you say?
It was not even the little brother. It was like the distant cousin that never spoke to each other. Like Elstow 1 anglers were totally different to Elstow 2 anglers. Like Elstow 1 was well stocked, full of big fish. They had it fairly secretive for a lot of years. It was a lot of a click on there, one that I fell foul of. Pit 2 was like a different sort of lake. There
So
were not many.
this click, was it because you were outside of the area as well? Because you were.
I was actually born from there, but no, it was notorious back in the day. They had an exclusive stock of carp that they went to great lengths to keep out the press for a lot of years. I mean, even now, some of the it was known as the Bed's clay pit or the Bed's deep pit. They don't even like saying the name of it now, and it's nothing special, the stocking pit one now. But it was well stocked, full of big fish. It was a totally different ball game to pit 2. I mean, there was only a handful of pit 1 members that have ever fished pit 2 properly, that I can think of, in 20 years. Like it's completely different style of fishing. But yeah, and anyway, just getting my head round it. Once I got stuck into it and realised, that especially when like first fish I landed was the actual mother. It was the hardest one out of the 2. It was then game on. Like nobody had ever caught both 40s.
You've got the picture up there, Jamie.
There it is.
Oh yeah, that was it. I mean, I had hair then. I think I look younger now than I
God,
did
you do
then.
look different then.
How old were you there, Jamie?
I mean, it was 2001, 2002, so nearly 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 28 or something. But that was while I was still sort of. I was a rocker in the 80s, so I had long hair. Like,
Oh, did you?
yeah.
How long was it?
Long, like down here at times.
I was long as well, Tope.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. We all put some pictures up one day, maybe.
My hair was my identity, so when I lost it, like it was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, same. I could say the same.
Yeah, it's gone. I mean, best bit of advice anyone is starting to recede in it. You tend to notice on video cameras. Obviously, I work in the night industry, and there's cameras all over the place. If you ever stood in the office and see yourself walking past, like on the camera, like the first bald spot that goes at the back of your head, like for some reason CCTV cameras just pick it out.
It's funny.
It's like a halo, isn't it?
It's funny you say that because I remember the exact moment I first saw. Like I was one of them. I was always going. It was my first year at uni. I got in a lift.
Yeah.
Lift. There's like really bright lights right above you, and a nice big mirror around the side. And I could see this light beaming down. I could see my head through the top of my hair. I was like, oh no.
I remember greyness as well, actually. But my first grey streak was probably about 25 years ago. And a guy at work came out, looked at it, and he just plucked it out, and he said, "Look at that."
Oh, that's harsh.
But it took a while after that, actually.
Well, my dad's grey, like completely round. He's white. It's white now, but it was grey even when I was a kid. And I thought, no problem. I'll still have long hair. I can dye it. Like if it goes grey, no problem. Like and grey looks nice. You know what I mean, the silver fox looks not bad at all. But yeah, then it went like that. So yeah, biggest advice to any young'uns. I think I was about 25 when it started going. Just get it off. Like it's the most liberating thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I did. It took me a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
But
Everybody goes through the denial stage.
Well, go through the denial
Exactly.
stage. Maybe think about getting some implants, but that's a bit expensive.
Yeah,
I had a barber tell me to get implants once.
They don't
Really?
last.
Insulting to that.
They don't last, do they?
I don't know if I'd want it now. Like having had a bald head for nearly as long as I had hair now, I don't think I'd want it.
That's
Like
your
that hassle of
identity,
it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get used to it. I think maybe your head shapes naturally to the roundness. I don't really know.
What's meant to be. So the mother was the first fish you caught out of there?
Yeah, and what a carp that was. I mean, you can see there, it's like it never changed shape. I think it peaked at 48 pound. Guy called Ian Stott. Have you had him on the podcast ever, Stotty?
No.
He's I don't hear him much in recent years. I'm sure he was attached to Korda at one time or another.
No.
I think maybe
Right.
tackle or whatever years ago. But anyway, yeah, Stotty had it at 48 was kind of when it peaked, and then it disappeared and never turned up. Was never found dead, but it's clearly gone now. But it was a quality carp, and the fact that I'd caught like what was deemed as the more elusive one out of the 240s, it left it game on for catching the others, and nobody had caught both fish since they'd been 40 pounds.
Did you have a plan when you caught that fish? But what did you have something going in the first place there?
Not really. one thing I'd learned about is I think fish in low stock waters are generally easier to catch than pressured waters because they're not expecting to be caught. But as long, I'll give that a caveat, as long as you kind of understand that they're in their surroundings, they're not pressured, but if you make them feel pressured in any way, i.e. move on showing fish or whatever, quite often they'll be gone before you've got the first rod out. And that was the first lake that I really found that. So you do what you're doing, you're in an area, you're looking for, in low stock lakes, like any sign of fish is really important. Completely different sitting on a lake that's full of fish. Like you see one show, well, it's not on its own, it'll be in a group of at least 4 or 5, you know. What I find in most lakes is normally 2 or 3 groups of fish. Now that doesn't really matter if the lake's got 500 fish or 10 fish in. Like if it's got 10 fish in, there'll probably be a couple of loners and a group of 3 and a group of 3 or 4 or something. All the low stock lakes of fish are kind of like that. And there's normally a hierarchy. So in St Ives, when I fished there was a handful of 30s, a few between 18 and upper 20, and then 2 big ones. There was the Lady, which was a good 50, and one called the Black Pig, which was a 40. The Black Pig had its own group of fish that it swam about with, and the Lady had its own group of fish, and no one ever braced them, as far as I know. Ever. Like they're just 2 completely different groups of fish. So you knew, like, we'll probably move on to this in a bit, the Lady, but there was a fish that always swam with the Lady called Bob's Linear. The amount of people that had Bob's Linear with the Lady, normally the bite before the Lady or the bite afterwards, immediately, was incredible. Anyway, the same thing used to happen with the mother. There was I think it was a fish called Lisa that used to get caught with that, and the Elstow guys will probably be like banging the table now because I've got it wrong, but I think it was Lisa always used to get caught with the mother. But anyway, once I'd kind of caught.
So with the showing fish stuff, I mean, so were you you were paying a lot of attention to that, or were you baiting areas and waiting for fish to get onto you?
I wasn't doing any baiting on there. Actually, no, I tell a lie, yes I was. That led to the capture of the twin. But at the time, no. I mean, I was out my depth. I'd done pre-baiting and stuff on different lakes. I was taught by it was a guy called Steve Jones who owned a little tackle shop in Wilmslow, which kind of shows the importance of these small tackle shops. He was responsible for me getting really into fishing back then because he was somebody I could ask questions to when I was young, and I remember he taught me how to pre-bait. I said that I wanted to do it. He was a bit of a pet shop as well, so he sold all like the maples, and I say maples because that's the one I chose. It was like 20p a pound or whatever it was at the time, and I was a kid on a paper round, sort of 13 years old, but he told me what to do. Soak these maples, put them in every day for a week, and the day before you fish, don't put any in. That's what he told me, and I did it, and I did it in a swim on my local lake up in the northwest. It was Colemere. I did it on a swim that never did fish on there. I just thought, it's a bit of a test, and I know no one else is going to fish over me bait. Anyway, it worked. I think I caught 5 fish by the time it went dark on the Friday night. Baited it every day. I've never done a baiting campaign that hasn't worked since then. Your problem is other anglers. Can you actually do a baiting campaign on a busy lake or whatever? I actually did a baiting campaign on Yateley Car Park Lake, the worst lake to do it in the world. In a swim that hadn't done a fish for 2 years, and Darryl Peck reaped the rewards of it. He had most of his fish off the back of that baiting campaign.
My last baiting campaign, I baited for a good month or so, put a lot of bait in there, caught a fish off of it, and then I think I said to you, they decided to take the water levels down. The second week I was fishing there, about 2 days after I caught the first fish, and you could actually see the exposed area where I was baiting out the water after that. So, but you're right though, aren't you? It's like, baiting is
key. If you can train the fish, I mean, they're animals at the end of the day. You can train your dog. You could take a bowl of peanuts. But we call this the dog in the pub theory. So you could take a bowl of peanuts now, and you've got your dog there. You could pour the peanuts out, and the dog's going to eat every one of them in 5 seconds flat. Eat the lot, and then look at you going, give me some more. Like,
sounds like my dog.
It's all dogs, right? But if you take that same bowl of peanuts, tie the dog up here, let somebody hold him, right, and you go and dot those peanuts all around this studio in here, right? The dog's then gonna the dog's, as soon as you let him go, he knows his food. He knows he can go and eat it. He's going to go to that corner. He's going to go all over. He's going to take half an hour, like, looking for peanuts. And when he's at the last one, he doesn't know he's at the last one. Like, he's still going to be looking around for food. And I think I've applied that to baiting up over the years. So if I'm going to do a baiting campaign, I'll do it on the winds normally, because fishing these low stock, less pressured lakes, fish act naturally. You know, I've fished pressured lakes where the fish never turn up on a wind, they always turn up on the back of it. And I'm sure we've conditioned them by flinging 4-ounce leads at them, you know, every time they pop their head up. If you're fishing a lake with a group of good anglers that are all watching the lake and they know what they're doing, they just learn that the last place I want to stick my head up is on the end of this wind, because, you know, that's where all the danger is, all the pressure, all the lines, everything that feels unnatural to them. But I think on low stock lakes, I think once you get your head around them, they're easier than well-stocked lakes. And
this throwing the peanuts around the room, I mean, would that mean that you would necessarily scatter bait around a little bit more than condensing it?
Yeah, I definitely spread bait, as we call it, in certain situations, especially if there's bait boats on a lake. Like, you definitely want to spread it around, because they're just used to seeing little piles. Or, I mean, it's just an excuse for being a bad spodder. I can sling stuff all over the place and say, I'm spread baiting today. No, it's a joke. I'm a reasonably accurate spodder. But it's horses for courses. It depends on circumstance. I mean, the golden rule on every lake I've ever fished is do the opposite of everyone else. But that you know, if everyone's using really, really short hook links and feeding sort of tight carpet feeds, hempen pellets, say, where the fish are really close to the bottom, sort of, you know, not having to move around much between mouthfuls. You know, generally you want a really short rig as a rule. But if on that lake, that's Elstow 1's a good example of what I've just described. Like, it's a hemp and corn water, everyone uses hemp pellet and then fishes fake maize. I went on there with long hook links and boilies. You know, I think on Elstow 1 I only fished there 2 months, but I think I'd had like 26 fish by the time I left, whereas the guys that were normally top rod were on like 2 or 3 and stuff. I only fished there till start the spring, really.
There's so much of that, you know, associate, not so much memory, but for fish just remembering by association.
Muscle memory.
Yeah.
They become acclimatized to how it fishes. You know, and how many people use a 2-foot hook link on a water, you know, but if you did, it'll make a difference. I remember there was a craze years ago of really long hairs, like really long. I'm talking like, you know, that sort of length. A good 4 to 5 inch. I remember having a chat with Roger on this lake where the King George's Reservoir was. It was quite a famous carp pond back in the day in Altrincham in Cheshire. Nothing big in there, like Scraper 20s, the biggest, but it was well stocked. You could catch in the winter. I remember having a conversation with him. He couldn't get his head around these hairs, and he was like, "Yeah, but it's got to be big fish, you know. It's not." I went, "Right, I'll do it on George's. We'll go for a couple of nights." I think we had to break the ice. It was that cold. Smash the ice with the boat to fish. And I had one in the middle of the night on a hair that was like, I'd probably gone even longer, you know, and it was like 14 pound or something, nailed perfectly in the lip, you know, and super long hair. It's but how many people do that? I think just being different.
You think that's why the rig was so successful in the first place, though, because it was, you know, that's how people were initially using the hair rig anyway, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I remember the first time I got told about it, we were using cotton and tying it to the shank, you know, and it was a good couple of inches then.
You want to see it? I didn't show you downstairs, actually. We got a picture of Lenny Middleton in the in reception, and underneath there is his original hair rig. And you see how long that hair is.
I'll be interested to have a look at that on the way out. Yeah.
So on Elstow then, so did you put yourself out to do everything different to everybody else?
No, I was naive then. I was learning, you know, how low stock slate worked, and the important lesson to take from that one was the fish. Generally, I think on those sort of lakes, low stock lakes, when you should catch, you do catch. Like, so if you've got fish showing over your spot and your baits are presented there, you normally get the bite, whereas that's not always the case on more pressured lakes. But I think what I learned was try and get ahead of the fish, because they weren't pressured. If I saw fish jump and I moved on them, then they were gone by the time I'd even set up or chucked a rod out. So I worked out that they were acting naturally. They were moving on the winds. So I was looking for a wind change that coincided with the day. So I'd DJ Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I had a routine every week where I had 2 vehicles, one for going to work in and meeting ladies, and a battered up old purple Securicor van for all my fishing gear that lived in there. So on Sunday night, no women. It was take the battered van, fully loaded, and as soon as I finished 2 a.m, I'd drive down south, which should always usually get me for about first light to the lake, which is obviously when you want to be on a lake. So that was kind of a regular routine for years. I was looking for a wind change on that coincided with the wind came on the Monday. Anyway, I once I kind of worked this out the hard way by blanking for 20 odd nights, I saw this wind change coming. It was changing on the Monday. It was going to be a southwesterly, really carpy sort of. In hindsight, looking back, I know you want to talk about this, but it was a new moon. I hadn't really discovered the importance of moons at this point, but generally 8 of the 12 new moons a year bring low pressure and a strong wind, and quite often it'll only be for that 2 or 3 days of the moon period. So I saw it coming. I blagged my boss to take a Sunday off work, which was nigh on impossible. Like when you're a DJ and the crowd knows you and everybody knows you, sort of resident, like you can't just put somebody else in to replace. Costs the venue money anyway. It would have been a Sunday night. Sundays were an R&B night. I think I was working in Preston at the time, in the Mood Bar in the centre of there, and I hated R&B, like it wasn't my thing. So I did know a couple of good R&B DJs, so I managed to get the Sunday off. I remember it vividly. I've got down to the lake, and the twin had actually been out that morning, so the wind was blasting an easterly into like the car park corner. Car park corner was known for doing this, the other 40, the twin. And there was one guy on the lake, beautiful in them days, 30 acres to himself.
Yeah, you can't imagine that.
No,
Okay.
and I'd heard he'd had the twin on the Thursday night. Anyway, he was a little bit funny, this guy as well. I'll come to that in a sec. But he, as I turned up, he was packing up. He went, "Oh, suppose you want to go in here then?" Like, wind was hacking in there, looked carpy as hell. I was like, no, I'm going the other side of the lake. And I remember seeing his face drop. He looked at me as if I was crazy. He was like, he's had one of the big ones. But first of all, the mother never came out of that swim. The twin was known for coming out of that swim. The mother had never been out of that swim ever in all the history. That's something else we can talk about with low stock lakes, but patterns are very, very important. Just doing your research on previous captures and stuff. Anyway, I was like, I'm going around the other side of the lake. I'd never forget his face. Like, he looked gobsmacked, just presuming, a bit resentfully he was, he's going to take over the fisher obviously had been there. He must have been seeing him. He's caught one of the big ones. He's like, Jamie's going to go in here and probably catch one. A bit of that carp angler resentment. These are my fish, you know what I mean? Or I've had the result. Anyway,
or what do they know that I don't know as well? That's the thing,
I don't even
it?
think he was thinking like that, because I was definitely naive. I wasn't claiming to be good, but I'd worked out that I needed to beat the winds. The fish were moving on the winds, and if I chased them, they went. So there was no barrows or nothing on this lake. Like, it was knee deep clay. It was raining as well, and it was handballing your gear, and it was a long way to the other side of the lake through a farmer's field. Like, it was not pleasant. 2 or 3 trips. Back in the old days, sort of pre-barrows, although there was barrows, you just couldn't use them here. And anyway, I remember, sometimes when you've got a big wind change and it goes flat calm just before the wind actually changes. It did that. So I've got my gear around. I've not got any rods out or anything, but I've got my gear around. It's about, I think it's about tea time or late afternoon on the Sunday now anyway. And it's actually stopped raining. It's just gone flat calm, which it wasn't forecasted at all, but it kind of does it when the wind's about to change. Anyway, I'll never forget, I was cooking a curry because I thought, I'm in no rush. I'm here a day earlier than I'm meant to be. I took a day off work to beat the wind. Like, I'm in no rush. I might as well get some dinner. Like, I've been messing about all day. Get some dinner, and I looked out, and a fish popped its head up like 30 yards out in the flat calm. I was like,
how rare was that to see that?
Very rare, but very rare considering the fish should have been on the other side of the lake, and I'm not expecting them to move to me. And it's something I found a lot. Fish, they interpret new weather conditions before it actually happens, like, and they react to it. I think I've seen that happen a lot.
Freezing conditions and stuff like that as well. It's
they know it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's their environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, something we might go, like now it's a little bit colder now. I'm thinking, I might put a coat on. Like the second I'm thinking I might put a coat on, they've felt that change come in a day before or hours before, whatever, because it's their natural environment. Anyway, I'd gone with the plan as well of filling it in. So I've got a big bucket, you know, sort of 15 kilo bucket of particle that I'd boiled up, and my plan was to spot it in and sit and wait for the fish to come to me, which is now all up in the air because I've got round there, it's gone flat calm, and the fish are already there. I've just seen one pop its head up, which is real significant sort of sign. And I'm now like, I remember ringing Roger up saying, what do I do? Like, I've come here with this plan and the fish are already here. Do I really want to spot a bucket of bait out on top of its head now? I was like, oh, bloody hell, what do I do? In quandaries. Anyway, I ended up just going for it, just thinking, right, I want to get sorted. I'm here for 3 days. It is a new wind. Like, I'll led around. There was all this like carpet onion weed down the shelf. Like, it's no clear spots. Like, you either go into super deep water, 30 foot where the onion weed stops, or you fish in the onion weed, and it is just a carpet. There's no spots or anything. Anyway, I remember having about 20 casts with I took a 1 ounce lead, because I thought if I can feel any sort of bump with a 1 ounce lead, then it's really presentable. Which is a sort of another little tip if you're fishing weedy lakes.
Onion weed especially as well, because it's so difficult to get a good presentation in that stuff, isn't it? It's
exactly. So anyway, I've gone around. I've kind of found the best of a bad spot, if you know what I mean. I still couldn't get my head around fishing in 30 odd foot, so I wanted to find, I was hoping the bottom of the shelf where the onion weed stopped was about 20 foot, something like that, and it wasn't. It was deeper. Anyway, I found somewhere I thought was presentable. It was about 22 foot, probably 35 yards out. Something. Anyway, I'd had like 20 or 30 casts with a 1 ounce lead around here. Thought, right, that'll do. It's good enough. Put a longer hook link on. I put my sticks on that I always used, the Korda sticks as they were actually called back in the day. And it was a freak cast. Like, I flicked it out and it's gone crack. Like, there was no crack there. I'd had a lot of casts sort of in that area, and there wasn't one. It was one of them where you just like put the rod down, going, that is not moving till I go out. If it's out 3 days, it's out 3 days. It doesn't matter. And then I got the other rod sorted. Fished the night. It was really carpy. The wind came as it was meant to. It was blasting in sort of a westerly or southwesterly, and a swim called the decoy. It later turned out I could predict captures of the mother from that swim by looking at the weather. Like Mark and I predicted it to each other, because Mark Watson, that's where I met him on Elstow too. And we would ring each other going, it's mother weather, and it'd come out the next day. Like, it loved that really, really strong wind blasting onto that bank, and never got caught in less than 20 foot of water. Oh, that's something else I learned. It would always come 22, 23 foot.
Have you learned as well with that with that change in conditions as well, that you can't anticipate it too early? I mean, the fish are really
I
moving
thought
on
I had
that.
done that.
Have you noticed that subsequently since then as well?
I've definitely noticed it on a number of low stock lakes since. I haven't actually fished any low stock lakes for the last few years. I mean, they're few and far between now, aren't they? Because everyone's realised that you fill a lake full of carp and put a road round it, and you don't even need carp in it. For 5 years' time, like when the fish are going 20s and 30s, you're just going to clean up, financially. That talk about, I always remember RMC had all them lakes that they have eventually sold off when they got away with the kind of the leisure division, which is where most of us, especially anyone who lives in the sort of southeast, like that, most of your fishing's gravel pits from the from the gravel companies. They all had a fishing division at one time or another. ARC, RMC, CMEX as it's called now.
Leisure sport before that.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
and they had a lot of low stock lakes, like your Raisberries and stuff like that. They had a lot, like, all they had to do literally was put 500 fish in each of them, and they'd still have the leisure divisions to this day. You know.
Oh, Pete Springate showed me when he started fishing the leisure sport lakes, late 60s, early 70s. They just had everywhere. You know, it was like the whole. You only had to buy one of those tickets.
Yeah, I had a leisure sport ticket for a number of years. I mean, my early fishing was on Horseshoe when I was sort of 14, 15, and that was ARC. Amy Roadstone. pre-Carp Society and stuff.
Boyer Leisure as well, wasn't it?
Boyer Leisure, yeah. There's another one. I had the Boyer coverall ticket for Farlow's, Rodney Meadow. They owned Harefield as well. That was a separate ticket. Yeah, I lived in Watford for a few years when I was in the band.
But yeah, like you say, it's changed, hasn't it? Those low stock waters
there
nowadays.
aren't many, but yeah, but I definitely noticed that on other lakes where the fish have moved before the conditions, like just before. And I know the fish were at the other end of the lake because that guy had the twin, and just presumed I wanted to go in there. And I've gone the other end. Fish were already there. Anyway, to cut this very long story short,
no, it's fine
because we've got longer stories than this one. That rod that I left out that went down with the crack. 5 o'clock the next afternoon, so it was about 24 hours after I'd put it out. Just an absolute one-toner. Bear in mind, I've done 23 nights at this point without a fish. Yeah. It was alien. What's that noise? And it was screaming, and the reel was absolutely melting, as the mother did for everybody. It's one of the reasons we know Terry sort of lost it, because he was fishing in the deep water in the swim it comes from at a certain time of year, and it melted off. The fish, as you could see from that picture we saw before, like its fins, its tails like two of my hands. Its fins are a good one hand, and it fights like and it was a pretty dogged fight. And my first sort of 40-pounder fell over the net, but it wasn't an accident. It was 23 blank nights learning what I had to do. It was nearly messed up the plan because I think the fish were there before the conditions.
That spot that you found then, did you ever find it again?
No.
Really?
No, just one of them freak ones. So what we found in that onion weed, it was gin clear Elstow too, and you could make those spots in the edge. So I'm talking in the edge is still 14, 15 foot deep, but you could see it in the edge. If you threw a handful of hemp, we used to call them carp footprints, so you'd put a few handfuls of hemp down there and they would clear a spot this big. Like literally, it was impossible to drop a lead on it, even when you're looking at the spot, sort of underarming it, because you'd make these little spots manually in the edge. And it must have just been one of those. It must have been someone else's patch of bait one time, or there must have been a reason why that's cleared it. And as I said, it might have been 6 inches diameter. Just an absolute fluke, complete sort of freak. As I said, we later learned how to create those little spots. That they would something about the onion weed that was full of bloodworm underneath it as well. If you ripped up a clump of it. It just looked like carpet. If you've never fished on a lake with onion weed, it's the weirdest weed I've ever fished on. It'd turn your swivels and hooks rusty overnight. So, I mean, when have you ever had a swivel go rusty? Like, to this day, no other lake I've ever had that happen. One night, it's all the coatings come off, and it's actually rusty after one day.
With it as well, I mean, I've seen it over in a boat before as well. When you're going over it, and it's a lot thicker and denser than it actually feels. If you cast a lead into Canadian or something, it's just thick. Onion weed doesn't necessarily feel like that. So you could be fishing in it. You've got no idea. You've got no presentation whatsoever.
No, it's weird. So yeah, I must have accidentally found one of them little carp holes. But that was game on for the rest of the year. I was like, wow, I've caught the hard one. Out there too, the twin, could be a couple of times a year. It was a newer 40. Yeah. That kind of come through the ranks recently. I didn't even know there was another 40 in there when I joined it to fish for the mother. And I ended up catching that on the harvest moon in October that same year. So that was kind of...
Got a picture there of the twin there.
It was a night shot. This is pre-digital cameras, so it was a set of car headlights were on the fish.
Creative, I like it.
Yeah,
came out all right, didn't it? That actually.
Yeah, it was a good picture. I think it was front.
Must be blinded actually if it was car headlights.
Yeah, I've done that before for casting. I've done that when I've been casting to an island before and lined the old main beam up with the spot on the island, but not.
And
with
don't
a fish.
Forget, it was an old knackered Ford Escort van as well. Them lights were more orange than halogen.
Were they?
Yeah. It was a fun night that, and I never forget. I rang Roger. Obviously, told him there was an A team of 5 or 6 fish, so there was a few 30s. Lisa that I mentioned before, I forget the names of them now. There was one called Epileps. It was the double of the twin. They were identical, just them big plates across the top of it, it's back. I think they call it, is it the dink strain?
Yeah, that's right.
Those
Yeah,
fish.
yeah, they got
yeah,
distinctive.
Yeah, well, the epilepsy was almost identical, and it was about £37. I wanted to catch the others. Like, I just started to unlock the code. That's what I find with these lakes. They're like a jigsaw puzzle. The low stock lakes, it's all quite logical. Once you've learnt a lake, you could tell somebody else how to do it, and I did. There's a number of sort of well-known anglers, friends of mine, people like John Mack and that later went on to catch some other that. I was in contact with them every day. They were, asking questions, asking the right questions. But I wanted to catch the rest of them. And Roger Bacon, I remember him saying to me on the phone, "Do you think Terry Hearn stays on a lake once he's caught the two biggest?" Like, no, you've got a golden opportunity. Move on. I had nowhere else to go to, really. I'd been named down on Yateley Car Park, but that I'd only put it on that year, and they said it was 2 years at the time, so I wasn't expecting a ticket there. Would
you have stayed on if Roger didn't say that to you then?
Probably, yeah. I was just starting to enjoy it. I just started to unlock the puzzle. I've gone from really struggling, as everybody did, at the time. Gone from really struggling to getting some bites, and it's like, wow. Now I might as well just stay, use what I've learned, and clean up. Try and get the rest of them. I enjoyed the fishing there. There was a bit of a camaraderie. It's myself, Paul Harris, and Mark Watson. We were having Tuesday night barbecues every week. It was kind of free. There was nobody watching you. There was a hardcore of 3 or 4 midweekers, and probably the same at weekends that we never saw because we were all midweek. And it was just like, I really enjoyed it.
And Elstow 1 had quite a good atmosphere on there, didn't it? With the he's shaking his head here.
No.
What was that?
It did if your face fit. I mean, a lot of the members on there, they'd had tickets 20 years before I got there. You were stepping onto their turf. So after doing a year on pit 2, like, I kind of walked in there, maybe with a wrong attitude, but I kind of walked in there like, I'm already part of the furniture. You're not. You're starting from below zero.
You wanted to fish Elstow 1, did you, if you had a chance?
I wanted to, yeah. The locals made it impossible for me to fish there and enjoy it, I think. I started catching fish as well. I had 630s, which was, 30 is probably equivalent now of mid-40s plus. I had 6 in the session out the reeds, and one of the locals came up to me and said, "You won't have any problems on this lake if you don't go in this swim again." Basically told me I couldn't fish the best swim on the lake.
Right.
There was all sorts of stuff, and I'm not saying my attitude was the best for combating it. I'd certainly handle it differently now to what I would have done then. I was just like, how can you tell me what to do? I'm within the rules.
So you're outspoken if it comes to that.
Yeah, I was just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I paid me money, same as you have. You haven't got any rights over me to tell me what to do or how to do it. In reality, that's not how it works on syndicates. You are going into somebody else's territory, and we are tribal as humans, aren't we? We and
would you show more display? I can't talk today. I tell you what. Would you be
worry,
more diplomatic nowadays?
Without doubt, yeah, without doubt. To a point, though. We had this conversation before. We were talking about another lake that I won't actually name now, but a lake where the owner is notorious for being, you have to walk on eggshells around him. I don't know how long I could do that for now. To tolerate somebody being an idiot just so I can, get along there. I'm not sure that's in me as an older person now. But I definitely handle it better.
Yeah. Well, and how you would adapt once you actually got on there as well, because then that's the first part, isn't it? And
there's lakes. I always remember the story of the Cons, which was a well-known sort of Colne Valley place that was very secretive for a lot of years, and the way to get on the lake that had the 50s in, where nowhere had 50s in the country, really. I think Harrow might have just done one, but that was it. The way to get on there is you had to join one of the lakes and then not fish for 2 years, and that was the only way you could actually get accepted on there. I'm like, I haven't got that in me, to spend time on the waiting list for a bit and then actually get the ticket all keen, and it's like to not actually go there. You go there once, I think, show your face, and then don't go back again. Don't be too keen. It's like, yeah, I think that's what they said in Elstow 1 about me. You were too keen. It's like, I'm just a hungry, young, keen fisherman. Yeah, just being keen's not a crime. But I also accept now, looking back in hindsight, that stepping on somebody else's, it's the when in Rome thing, isn't it? And I might not agree with how they do it, but that's kind of how it is. But if you know that before you go, you don't go in like a bull in the china shop just going, right, what's the best peg, how do I get in it, which is kind of how I was. But I'm also not going to stay around in an unpleasant atmosphere, and they did make it unpleasant for me. There was a draw one Monday morning, I think. You had to draw for swims on the weekenders drew on a Friday, and the midweekers drew at like 12 o'clock on a Monday or 11 o'clock, and you never know quite who's coming off the lake, like who's got a week booked or whatever. So there was 3 or 4 people on the lake. I don't know if they're packing up or not. I came out first in the draw, and so there's half a dozen of us stood in the car park, and it's nobody had talked to me. I'm like, okay, I've come out first. Is he going out of that swim? Everyone's looked down. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't even. I was saying, well, if you don't tell me, I'm first. I'm just going to have to do a lap around this lake now for an hour, and ask who's coming and who's going before I can make my decision. And they just all ignored me. So that's what I did. Like everybody stand in the car park waiting for an hour rather than give me some information about. Is that person leaving or are they not leaving? Because everybody had to be off by a turn. Was this
a common scenario for a lot of people, or just for you?
A lot of people fell foul of that place. Some people got on fine. There was a definite in a clique, and I could mention some of the names now, and some of them would be notorious. But back in the day when they were being secretive, they used to do cars in anyone. Even Martin Clark, who became a bailiff of their, well-known angler, even he was known as T-shirt. They were very anti anyone who was attached to a company, anyone they thought might profit off the lake, bait deals or anything like that. And he was known as T-shirt because if you wore a branded T-shirt, Korda or whatever, like you were an outcast, And he wrote about it in his book. He wasn't accepted, and he later became a bailiff and was from Luton.
I remember that. Yeah.
As I was. So I'm not saying. This is 20 years ago.
Things change.
It's 20 years ago, and it wasn't really secretive then. It was a bit more known about. But I probably went in like a bull in the china shop against a group of people that were never going to take that. They ate people like me for dinner, and they did.
So where did you move on to?
That Elstow 1 bit, actually, it took me 2 years to get the Elstow 1 tickets. So that actually happened a couple of years later. But I remember having nowhere to fish, my name down on Yateley, and Roger, who's sort of, king of the Northwest as far as knowledge goes, very well-respected Northwest angler, he had 3 rumours, and they were all rumours, didn't know if any of them were true. There was Tatton Park. There was a rumour there was 240 commons netted in a time when 40s are probably like a 55-pound carp now. The 240s are supposed to have been netted at an open day. They had a lot of like flower festivals and stuff like that there. Anyway, the story when the EA netted like this little, they call it the duck pond, but it's connected to the main lake, but it's like a half-acre pond, and netted 240s out of it that nobody ever knew they're in there. Ali's probably spoke about this in
Commons or Mirrors?
Commons,
right?
And I think the original story about this is in the Gaz Fairham's Forgotten Chapters book. They asked me to do my Colemere chapter in that book, but I've never really told that story much, which you're going to get to.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're going to hear it
shortly.
Now. Yeah,
but Tatton Park was one of the rumours. It was the Cheshire Mere, as they called it. There was a place called Rostern, which probably shouldn't have even said the name. There's some rumours about that place. It's completely no fishing. I'm the only person that's ever had fish out there, as far as I know. I had a couple of small ones out there quite a few years ago now, but it's completely no fishing. Has been since, like chased off, kind of protected. Big old, it's a few hundred acres. And then there's one called Colemere in Shropshire, and the rumour was there that it potentially held British records. Terry Hearn's good friend Ev had done like 7 years on there. Everybody knew that.
7 years.
7 years for one fish was the story. But again, he might have had 20 fish. Nobody would have known because he was extremely secretive. But we knew he wouldn't be fishing there for nothing. The rumours were it potentially had record fish. I mean, all the top low stock guys had a look at it over the years. People like Dave Mallin, all the kind of the high end serious guys that kept their head down. It's
a 90 acres Shropshire Mere.
90 acres. As it turned out, we reckon there was about 7 carp in there, but I didn't know they existed. Like Ev knew, obviously he'd watched them for a few years. Anyway, this was it was on a Stoke-on-Trent ticket, but it wasn't policed at all. You could only fish half the lake. It was, protected triple SI. And it was you against the fish, which is the sort of fishing that I liked. But I didn't know any fish lived in there for sure. The rumours were these two... The normal story, two big commons and a bigger mirror, which seemed to be the rumour for every low stock lake back then. There was two big commons and an even bigger mirror. It's like, right, fair enough. So I started on there after Elstow, after Roger kind of encouraged me, don't stay around, Terry Hearn style, get on to the next one.
How long were you prepared to give it for on there? Because
a year.
1 year.
I said a year because I thought I've had the time of life. I've never dreamt of catching a 40-pounder from reading all the Hutchie books or when I was a kid, coming up through the 80s. I never thought I'd be holding a 40-pounder. I've caught two, very respectful ones. That's the wrong word. Fish you gain a lot of respect for. They're not easy ones.
And the fish weren't seen, so you had nothing to. You had no experience of actually witnessing those fish in the water. What?
No, but I was full of beans now. Obviously, I've gone on to Elstow, did what everybody said was the impossible. Catch both the big uns in one season. As I said, one of them used to come out every few years. So, to catch them both in a season, I was invincible. I was still young, naive, and keen, but learning as I went. And I was like, I can handle not catching for a year. I did that 23 nights. Without catching on Elstow, it was a real sort of leveler mentally. You were meant to blank for that amount of time. Like when you've only got a lake with a few fish in it. If you take the A team out of any lake, right? Take a lake that's got 150 fish in it, standard sort of lake, 12 acres, 15 acres, whatever. It's got 100 fish. There'll be an A team of 6 fish. The 30s and a couple of 40s, or whatever the equivalent is these days, 3 40s and a 39 and a 50, whatever. But there'll be an A team. So if you took all the other fish out of that lake, that A team would still get caught once or twice a year. So there might be 12 bites a year out of this lake. Well, that's no different to the low stock lake that's actually only got 7 fish in it. If they get caught once a year or twice a year each. The only thing you're not doing is catching all them 18-pound commons in between. Yeah. But the appetizers, they don't really help you because, as I said, I've learned that fish swim in different groups. So the fact that you've had 3 20-pound commons that break up the boredom, it hasn't actually put you any nearer to catching like the A team of fish that you're actually going for. So I'd rather all these other little fish not be in there, because that's all you're doing is you're kind of relieving the boredom. Now, some people need to catch to enjoy it. Everyone goes fishing for different reasons. Once I'd got this kind of big fish buzz in my head, I just wanted to catch target ones. That feeling, and I remember it vividly of the mother, that feeling of, because when I was younger fishing, you didn't even know you were catching the same fish twice. Like, you were just catching a fish. I never used to take a camera when I was younger, and we didn't realise that we were catching the same stock of fish. Once we kind of realised that, and these fish now had names, which was also uncommon when I was young. To actually see a fish, I saw a picture of a guy called Paul Sharman holding the mother in Martin Clark's first book. And to look at that for inspiration, and then hold that fish yourself, and you don't even enjoy it at the time. You enjoy it when you get your pictures back. Like when you look back at the pictures, because you're in the moment. You can't. Every big fish I've caught, you don't really appreciate the moment. It's like afterwards that you kind of look back and do. But that feeling of elation, of targeting something, it's primal. I think it's hunting. We talked about the sort of tribal stuff before, but that like getting a target, going for it, hitting the target, or in this case, catching the fish, and then your trophy is the picture of it. To look back in that, like I'd looked at that picture of the mother before, and I can still relive that exact moment of elation. And there's something about that I think is, tribal nature, primal, whatever it is. Like it felt right to do it, and for a few years. I've gone on lakes that don't have anything bigger than 18 pound, and it's a runs water. I'm trying to catch 5 if everyone else is catching 4. I can enjoy that scenario for that scenario. But
would you ever fish a lake for just the lake?
100%, especially as I get older now. I'm that target fishing. I haven't done it for quite a few years, but that's kind of what I was known for, where I made my name, really, to get me to a point where, you know, I can actually talk with authority on a podcast about it or something. You know, it was kind of my coming up. But for a few years, that's all I wanted to do was to target. And it was something weird about seeing that picture in the book, and then, you know, you have that moment yourself, you know, and you're writing your own book almost, aren't you? Whether you do a book or not, it doesn't really matter. But that kind of target thing, it's addictive. It's that high is as high as any drug I've ever taken at the best party in the world. You know, there aren't many better feelings. So I was full of beans. Having had that, I've already beaten the game. You know, I've done the impossible. I've caught these 2 fish. I'm quite happy while I wait for another ticket, Yateley or whatever. I'm quite happy to go on blank for a year and just enjoy it. And anyone who's fished a mere in Shropshire will know they're stunning. Like, they're all glacial meres. They come from the Ice Age. They're, you know, tens of thousands of years old, some of them. The trees are old and creaking around you. You're like in a forest. It's just beautiful. Everything about it's beautiful. I was like, I'm in heaven, you know. Maybe I'll catch an unknown British record. That's always the carrot dangling on the end of the stick, is you might just do something incredible, but if not, I'm going to enjoy every minute of it.
Right.
So I fished up till Christmas. I met a good friend on there, Alex Perrin. He used to come down and see me most nights. He was local, and he'd done a little bit on there. So we were just talking deep carpy chat, you know. In fact, I think that the peanuts dog in the pub theory was one of those conversations, you know, discussing spread baiting and stuff. Became really close with him. So I never heard a fish. I never saw a fish. I caught 1 tench and a pike off the bottom on fake corn, and that was literally the only action I had in life.
Anybody else fishing the lake?
Never saw another angler at the time.
Just you there?
Just me on like 100 acres in
and so your mindset for each session of not seeing anything, I mean, were you just optimistic every time, or I mean,
I was just going through the motions. Yeah,
that?
It didn't really matter. I was doing what I was doing. I was looking around the lake. I was looking for like bird life and stuff, because I was thinking I can't see any fish, so I'll look for other signs, which was basically stuff on top of the water. Didn't really help, although after walking the lake a couple of times, when I had the pike off the bottom, I'd walked the lake for a bit, and I'd chosen the swim based on it was the only area of the lake that had some birds. The bird, you know, 85 acres had no birds, and this one area did. I was like, some lake, I remember Horseshoe, which you know very well, the carp were always with the ducks on there, and then other lakes like St Ives, they were, if the lady came, the ducks would literally spook and they were off. They'd fly vertical just to get away from it, you know, if they saw it. They were terrified of it. So once you know that about a lake, the bird life can really help you.
Yeah.
And it's always one or the other. They're either comfortable together or they're not. And as I said, Horseshoe was wherever you see the birds, you get your binoculars on, because know there's thousands of them on there, and they're all out in the middle. If you get your binoculars, you can see the carp poking their heads up. The birds.
Sinking them sometimes. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's certain types of birds, like the crap that they're coming out, there's putting some sort of nutrient into the water. I don't know what it is, but it's always one or the other. Some lakes have fish that the carp won't go near the birds, so you're looking for the opposite. You're looking for an area of lake that's got no birds in, because quite often that's where the carp will be.
But the Colemere is a bit of a different story, because there aren't many in there in the first place.
Exactly, and you've got 90 acres of nothing, so like any kind of something that's different from the norm, like
no features or anything on the lake.
It's typical. It was a running joke with sort of the Cheshire and Shropshire lads, you know, to the southerners. It's supposedly it happened, or it could be just one of those kind of urban legends. But you know, the southerner that spent all day looking for a gravel bar, like in a natural maze, he's like, I can't find any bars in here.
Gotta go home. That's it. Yeah.
It's just 4 foot of silt. Like it's you know, it's been here 5,000 years, this lake, and was formed by a glacier rolling down the mountain. You know, the only thing you would find in them mares, sometimes you find piles of rocks, which obviously got dragged as the ice melted back in the day. It pulled the rocks down with it from the mountains quite often.
So, I mean, if you're looking for a drop in a Shropshire mere, I mean, are you looking for hard drops, or
there is no hard drops
anywhere?
There's harder. This is one thing I learned about those is anything that was out of the soft, and I mean soft, you're going down a foot, 2 foot or something, you could see it up your lead core or whatever you were using, so you could actually there is, what did we used to use? it wasn't tissue, but it was something similar, like almost like a white cloth. You could wrap it around your leader, cast it in with a lead, and actually see how deep the silt is, and then adjust your rig accordingly. But anything that was slightly out of the ordinary, sometimes you would get a thud, a soft thud, but it was a thud as opposed to really soft. And I always thought fish have done that. Like, there's no reason for that to be like that there, like, in 12 foot of water, 14 foot of water. The only reason that could be a little bit harder is because the fish have done it. Same if you find something that's just even a foot deeper than the rest of it around it. The fish have done it. I mean, we now know Simon Scott's talked about it a lot. Carp holes,
Well, I've seen it as well. I remember a few years back, we saw these fish feeding in the margins, and we had to be off the lake by 9 o'clock that night. We went back there the following week, and there was a crater the size of this table there, So and if you were putting a marker float across that, you're probably talking 6 inches, maybe 8.
Significant, though.
But it's significant when you see it. Yeah.
If you ever find something that's at 6 inches to a foot deeper than around it, especially with the old markers we use, it's a lot easier with like deepers and stuff now. With the old markers, like we use these sort of long range bolter ones that we make ourselves, and quite often, like, the difference is the length of the marker. So unless you're really accurate,
you could easily miss that.
Yeah, you could easily miss it. But once you found them, they were banker spots. You could always sort of. I'm talking on better stock lakes and stuff now, but. There were definitely firmer bits in that silt. It was still soft. You'd still think on any other lake you wouldn't have left the rod, But I always presumed it was fish that were doing it. This lake held the bream record years ago. I don't think there are any. I never saw a bream while I was there. I think they died, but it had history of doing the bream, and the only captures known of, which were where the rumours came from. So the rumours were that Ev was fishing there, and there was a bream angler whose name I do have. I've actually written this up for a chapter in a book, but I've not.
You're writing a book?
Yeah, Jamie Clossick and Friends.
Nice.
There's quite a few guest chapters in it. It's a good half dozen sort of chapters. People like Simon Crowe, Julian Cundiff. It was originally going to be a northern sort of book. Where I'm going to cover most of my fishing. It may never come out. I'm one of the people.
Right. You haven't got a publishing date.
I'm a good procrastinator. No, right. I was hoping to get it out for this summer. I've actually got the 2 main chapters, the Tatton chapter and Colemere, already written. Anyway, so I can remember the guy's name in the book, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But the rumour was he'd caught this fish known as the smallmouth mirror, which was 31 pound. And had a really tiny mouth, obviously, and he supposedly had another common. They were the only 2 captures known about on this lake by the general public, apart from the fact the rumour was Ev had 1 fish during his 7 years, which I couldn't believe. I was like, an angler that's clearly a good angler, like, how's he only caught 1 fish? Clearly,
was it? I mean, was he fishing it hard? I mean, he fished around Yateley and Surrey, those pits as well.
He fished it very hard, and on the couple of recce trips I did down there, there was evidence of him all around the lake, dinghies in the bushes, water bottles mainly, full still with sort of fresh water, like all around. And my pals had been down there and seen him on there. There was a point known as Ev's Point where he fished a lot of time on there, but the point was somebody of this caliber of an angler, a very good angler, fishing there for this amount of time, there's something significant in there to be caught. So even though I didn't catch a fish, all this is going in the back of my mind, plus I've got a year with nothing to lose. I've got no other tickets, so I fished up till Christmas, never saw a carp or heard one, nothing. I came back in the spring really, really confident. In fact, I think we'd done that session on King George's that I mentioned before where we broke the ice. I had about 7 fish, and so I always find you start off a year really positive, and maybe it's a good way to have a good year is actually go find somewhere in January that you can catch fish, and just get off to a good start, because it definitely kind of snowballs, I think, during the year. Anyway, this was one of those years, so I've gone back there in whenever it was starting to warm up, sort of end of March, April or whatever. I was determined to keep walking the lake, even if it took 2 days, just to walk the lake until I saw some sign of a fish. Anyway, I've got there at first light, which when you want to arrive at a lake on the Monday morning, it's 5 o'clock Monday afternoon, and I'm ready for selling my fishing gear. Like, I never saw anything. I was clueless. I was just like, where on earth do I go? I remember ringing Roger, who was fishing on a lake in Manchester. He's like, forget that, come down with me for a social.
But you don't know for sure exactly what's in there anyway, do you, really?
I don't, but it was one of them where it was like, any clue, anything I've ever learned about fishing, like I was trying to apply, is the birds acting weird or anything? Nothing. Like, and I've done a lap of this lake, and I literally have gone from like full of beans to I don't even want to fish anymore. Like my stubbornness, I rang Roger. We haven't done the gift, by the way.
No, I know. We'll talk about that in a minute. You noticed that, Tobe?
I have noticed.
Yeah. No, well, I was waiting for the right time, but it's fine. It's fine. We'll just do it when
only an hour and 20 in.
Yeah. I haven't even started. I've done one lake. Anyway, I rang Roger, and it was my stubbornness when he said to me, forget it. Go back there in a few weeks when it's warmed up a bit more. Just come and have the social with me on wherever he was fishing that night. He might have been on Sail Marina or somewhere, but he was like, Dead Man's. He was like, come down and do it. I was like, no. That was like literally the line drawn for me. I was like, that's not me. I don't give up at the first hurdle. And it was literally the first hurdle. I never once worried up until Christmas about being near fish or anything like that. I was just going through the motions. And now, because I decided I was going to, literally give it 100,000,000%. And first day, nothing. I was just like, this is no good. Anyway, I ended up just plotting up somewhere anywhere before it got dark, literally flick a couple of rods out, cook, because I won't have eaten because I'll have been sort of running around all day, got that first light, so I'll have been hangry as well, like really sort of frustrated and short-tempered. Anyway, I think over the next couple of days, I still saw nothing, but I formulated a plan which goes back to the pre-baiting. So I used to be pretty friendly with Gary Bays in them days as well, who fished Fen Drayton, which was kind of a similar sort of lake, a big lake with hardly any fish that didn't get caught much. And he had this bait, the Fen Mix, which he'd kind of developed for natural feeders. There was something else I've actually missed out of this. I've mentioned him a few times now, Terry, Hearn and Ev. That winter, after I'd stopped fishing at Christmas, we did the first Manchester Carp meeting, which now turned into the Northern Angling Show. But the very first one, we had Terry as a guest, and he drove up with Nick Hellier, and then Ev came to meet him, and so we ended up getting him really drunk. Obviously, by this time, I've done about 25, 30 nights on Colemere for nothing. Anyway, I told Terry with Ev that I was having a go, and Terry said to me, I'll never forget it, he said to me, if them fish were catchable, Ev would have caught them. They're natural feeders. And that, there's no bigger bit of motivation that, like, the carp god Terry Hearn, the best angler around, is telling me I can't do something. Well, I know me, and I can. And that might have exaggerated that me not being able to actually find anything on that trip round, the first trip in the spring. Like, it probably frustrated me even more because I was now going to prove everyone wrong, including the legend. But yeah, like the natural feeders, if they were catchable, everyone would have caught them by now. And I said to him, obviously, when we're drunk, have you really had one fish? And he was like, yeah. And I believed him, like, because we were obviously thinking he must be catching and just not telling everybody. He was known as a bit secretive anyway. But during that first session, after sort of nearly wanting to go home, I formulated a plan based on all the things we've already mentioned, the pre-baiting and stuff. There's no way you can pre-bait a 90-acre lake with any volume. Like, it's impossible. It took 2 hours just to do a lap of it, let alone stopping, looking for nice spots, putting some bait in. Like, that's a 3-hour to 4-hour trip round. So I came up with this plan to feed on the ends of winds, because again, what I'd learnt from Elstow about fish moving naturally is I wanted them to find some sort of bait, angler's bait. So I was using hemp pellet, corn, a few maggots, and a few of these boilies that Gary Bays had given me that he developed for Fen, which they had a lot of natural stuff in it, meant for natural feeders. So the plan was, there's only like, in a full bucket, 15 kilo bucket, it might be 2 kilos of these boilies in it, but with tiger nuts, with sweet corn, some maggot, because I wanted something natural in there. I basically wanted the fish to recognise this as food if they found it, based on what Terry had said, them being natural feeders. So the plan was, find a spot on the end of each wind. Half the lake you couldn't fish, and it was impossible to fish. It was boggy, like there was nowhere to set up, even if you wanted to the rules. And one half of the lake you could fish plus both ends. So I thought, right, I'll pick the winds. I want like 2 spots on the southerly, 2 spots on the southwesterly, 2 spots on the westerly, and then the northwesterly. So I think I had 8 spots around the lake, and not a lot of bait. It was literally, I don't know, 2 scoopfuls or something if I was using a scoop, or a few handfuls, maybe a kilo on each spot. And I did it on a Monday when I arrived. This was what I'd kind of planned during that first session, where I thought was absolutely wasting my time. What am I doing here? And I came up with this plan, which then gave me the motivation to sort of stick at it. So I had these 8 spots. I'd do it on a Monday. I'd take a bucket of bait to fish with, and then a second bucket of bait that I'd leave in the motor, all wrapped up and stuff so it didn't go off, to use on a Thursday. So before I left on a Thursday, the plan was to pick a swim, get the rods out, then do me lap of the lake, put the bait in the 8 spots, fish for the 3 or 4 days as I normally would, and then on the Thursday bait the same 8 spots before I left. I did that for a couple of weeks. Then there was 1 week I couldn't fish, and I drove. This was an easy drive compared to Elstow and stuff. It was like, I think it was an hour and 45 minutes from my door to the lake. So I did it 1 week, even when I wasn't fishing. And then I the following session, which must have been Easter, like approaching the Easter bank holiday, I set up. The wind was blowing up the bottom end of the lake, furthest bit from the car park, so it must have been southerly. I set up down there, and I remember the first evening it felt quite nice. It was warm wind, it felt pretty carpy, and I heard my first carp. It was a douche, it was the stereotypical dropping a cow from an airplane, like absolute. I was just, like my hair standing up on my arms, goosebumps, and it was incredible. I was just like, wow, there's carp in here, because I still didn't know, like, for sure. Ev knew, and his mates, but nobody else knew apart from the rumours. And I ended up seeing at least another 8 or 10 fish sort of round to the left. I was set up on like a little peninsula, so I had water behind me and water in front of me. And this fish was behind me. I was shot out the bivvy. It was like tea time. I think I was cooking or whatever. And it was like, seen the ring and everything. I was like, wow, this is it. In 30, probably 40 nights fishing now, it was like the first sign of a carp. And then just as it went dark, I had a bite, and all the rods were in the margins. And
so a long way off where it showed?
No, probably 40 yards or something, but it was a bit more in open water, kind of behind me, and I'd be rods just off the trees in front. I remember I'd got friendly with an angler called Dave Levy at the time, and who were fishing the Essex Manor, and they were big into this slack lining at the time. Even if they were fishing like the opposite bank, they were dropping the line off the rod tips, and typical being sucked into a fad with no actual real reason for using it. It cost me this fish. So this lake, I've had a bite. Can't believe it. I've come out, I've hit it. The line's all slack, but I'm fishing a lake with 1,000-year-old trees. You know what I mean? There's branches everywhere in the edges, and the line's going under a branch. It's like pinned underneath something where I've slackened it off. And the fish, it's about 14 foot deep, and this common, I saw it. It's like low 20 common, hit the surface. As I'm picked the rod up, and the rod's pointing directly down to the bottom, the fish has hit the surface like a rod length out in front of me. It thrashed on the surface and then got off. I was never in direct contact with the fish. I was like pinned to the bottom. So I was kind of gutted, because I've like, it was kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. But I knew it wasn't some British record or whatever it was we were supposed to be fishing for. Like, it was a low.
Well, at least you saw it.
Yeah, I saw it, so there was no doubt. But rather than being gutted, I was like, wow, I've seen a fish. I saw other fish show that evening as well, and I've had a bite. Like, I'm going to catch these fish. As if to kind of confirm that, when I left, nothing else happened that session. I didn't really see any more after that day. Did another couple of days. As I was leaving, I saw other anglers for the first time ever. So there was a couple of guys, they looked like ZZ Top, sort of big long beards, rocker guys. One's called Wall, I can't remember the other chap's name. Very friendly they were, and it's you against the fish, not you against other anglers. So they shared information straight away. I told them that I'd lost one, and they said that they'd seen fish showing by this boy. They were coming on for Easter weekend. They were doing a long weekend because I was leaving on a Thursday for work, and the reason why I'd never seen him before is because they were arriving on Thursday, because it must have been Good Friday the day after, so they were there, you know, a day earlier than they normally would have been, which is why we crossed paths. And he told me that he'd seen fish showing by this buoy. I think you might actually have a picture of that buoy, because it was all the spots I was baiting were with particle that I told you about, sort of particle mix with maggot and everything. And there was one spot, that buoy was about 60 yards out.
Right.
And obviously it would have took an extra hour walking around the lake if I was going to be spodding up a spot. So that was the only spot on the lake that I used a throwing stick and put boilie only. I put these fen mix boilies that Basie had given me. And that's where they'd seen the fish showing. And there was no other reason for the fish to be showing around that buoy than my bait being there. And it was the only place they'd seen them. And I
was
knew,
it clean around it? Or? Well,
I've never even cast a lead to it. I've no idea. But these meres, there's no feature in them, because obviously they're just a crater from the ice coming down. And I knew then I was going to catch whatever was in that lake. I was going to catch it, because they were feeding on this boilie. Bearing in mind, I've been told they're natural feeders. They won't eat bait. I've seen my first fish. I've had a bite, and then these two guys coming off the lake have told them, and it was the only spot on the old lake that I'd fed just boilie, and it was laziness, because there was no way I was going to add an extra half an hour on me baiting up mission to put 20 spods out by that buoy. So it was just pure laziness of just throwing stick, which was easy, you know, took 5 minutes.
So if those guys hadn't have mentioned that, then I mean, would that have changed?
Well, it wouldn't have changed anything, because I'd already had a bite and seen a fish, so I kind of knew that like they were catchable. It just kind of reaffirmed me, you know, I could not wait to get back to that lake. In fact, it might have been that week that I actually drove there just to bait up, because I couldn't fish the week after, and I might not have had that motivation to do it had they not told me what they'd told me. Anyway, the next session I came back to fish, wind was blowing up the other end of the lake. It was like a westerly. Anyway, there was a swim. I think the swim's got a name. Technically, on the Stoke ticket, it was you weren't allowed to fish this swim. But it's not out of bounds as far as the triple SI and everything.
Right.
To this day, you can fish that swim. Ev told me he did 2 years in that swim. 2 years in that swim, because it was an area the fish like waking up in the spring. So I've no kind of qualms about it technically being out of bounds then, because it's been fished ever since. In fact, Ev went on to catch the banana common from that swim later on.
And sorry, why did you say they were designated no fishing areas on there?
I think it was just ease for the club that controlled it, which didn't really control it. That, you know, they don't control it now. And in fact, I think by this year I'd realised that like it was just a free fishing pretty much. I don't even think I renewed my club ticket that year. But you never saw anybody. It was just kind of how it was. But I think where the out of bounds started, there was a big gap that you definitely weren't allowed to fish. There was like a boathouse and a big kind of, I think they called it the lawns or the green or something. It was a big grassy area, and then there was one swim, the swim I'm going to go on to, and then the rest of it was completely no fishing. Like you couldn't fish even if you wanted to. It was just really soft and boggy, and you know, like the whole one side of the lake. So I just think when the club controlled it, I think it was just easier rather than to put a sign from start to stop and then a whole load of no fishing and then just one swim you could fish. They'd have had to make another 2 signs, you know, right. Fishing stops here, fishing starts here. I just think it was practicality of it really, because the people who control the syndicate now, they're allowed to fish that area. Everyone fished that area. I'd never break a rule that nobody else broke. It's kind of a when in Rome scenario. If you fish a days only lake but everyone fishes it at night, and I'm going to fish that lake, I'll fish it at night. If everybody queues at the gate at 4 o'clock in the morning waiting to get on at 6, there's no way I'm going to sneak a fish out at night, you know, like my morals when it comes to stuff.
Well, you're not going to be the one that's going to get ridiculed if you catch something to stand out.
It devalues the capture.
Yeah,
you're just doing yourself harm. But if it's the done thing and everybody does it, I'm going to be doing it, you know. And I've been misrepresented a lot in my life. You know, it's a bit of a joke about catching fish out of bounds. Like it's never been out of bounds and isn't fished as much. I mean, this area that I'm talking about, which technically was out of bounds if you had a ticket, I didn't even have a ticket, but you know, there's been a few jokes and some resentful jibes, I caught it out the out of bounds. It's like, it was the most fish swim on the lake. The people that did fish it, that's where they fished. I mean, I didn't know this at the time. This is what's sort of come out afterwards. But it's very easy for there's a lot of bitterness, as you know, in fishing. I'd never fell out with anybody until I caught my first 40-pounder. That guy that I was telling you about, who's in the corner, that was a bit resentful on Elstow too. He came back and did the pictures when I caught the mother that same session, and wouldn't give me the pictures. He wouldn't give me the film out the camera.
Really?
Yeah, it took me months to get it. A chap called Christoph was a bit of a mediator. He was in Martin Clark's first book.
Yeah, I read that. I remember reading that.
Yeah. Christoph ended up putting it on the guy and saying, "You better give him.
Yeah.
You better give it him."
It's French guy, wasn't he?
Yeah. It's half sort of French. Owns a lake in France. Lovely fella, very very good angler. But I'd never had a crossword with anyone in 20 years fishing until I caught a 40-pounder. And the people you've been drinking tea with and cooking breakfast for in the mornings was suddenly being funny with you. It's a very funny world, the sort of the big fish.
It can be, but I mean, on the Colemere, it sounded like it was, you were talking to other anglers, which I guess is.
Well, I spoke to those two. I mean, this is pre-social media, but fishing forums, the CMEX forum, and there used to be one up north called the Fishing Warehouse. I took a lot of stick after the spoiler alert, where I'm going on to now. We wouldn't be talking about an elaborate story like this if I didn't actually catch some fish. So yeah, spoiler alert, I do. But I took a lot of flack. You caught it out the out, but anything to try and devalue the capture. I mean, I've had it since then, when it's not even been me. We may get time to talk about this or not, but the Manchester Park Lake fish, Mr. Angry, which is like one of the best fish in the country, I think, still alive now. It's got to be nearly 50 years old. In fact, it is 50 years old.
50 years old. Wow.
Yeah, it was close.
Have we got a picture of Mr. Angry Tech?
Yeah, we probably have. It's absolutely classic car. One of my best ever captures. I mean, the one we're about to get to is probably the biggest elation I've ever had. But Mr. Angry is.
There's a lot of kudos up your way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a cracking carp. Another male carp. Another rare one. Used to get caught a handful of, once a year. I think in the last couple of years it has come out twice a year, but generally it's a once a year, once every 2 years sort of fish. Absolutely cracking fish. But I did a campaign my first year on there. I never fished the school holidays. I had a young child then as well of school age. She's at university now, but I'd start again when she went back to school, September 6th or whatever it was, around that time. I would then start my autumn campaign. Anyway, I've gone back on here. I'd had a little do in the spring, had a couple of fish, and I'd gone back and I had a really good hit, like 6 fish hit, which for a lake, I think that lake had about 30 carp in at the time. Half of them were the mirrors that you're after, and there was a few sort of smaller commons. And I'd had one of my friends, Fireman Sam, as he was known on there, although he's not called Sam, but he is a fireman. He was doing the days next to me. He was going to Rainbow on the Friday, and he was a fireman working shifts at nights. And I was like, just leave your gear with me and just come and fish a few hours every morning. I was glad of the company and whatever. Anyway, I ended up having a really good session. Had 6 fish, which was 6 fish a year for 90% of the anglers on there was more than they were going to catch, and so to have it in one session, all the originals as well. Anyway, he ended up catching Angry next to me in the swim next door, which actually later on enabled me to catch it, because I worked out it was because I was on the bulk of the originals and it was near him but not with him, which was instrumental in me catching it. When I actually went back a few years later, I planned to fish near the fish, not on the fish, like to ignore captures to catch the big fish. This is one of the things I've learned when we were talking about those little clues I've had all my life. Like my mates, he literally chucks it in the places I would never fish, because I'm fishing for fish and he's just doing his own thing. Quite often you have to have that mentality for big fish, that they act differently to the rest of the lake, considering they probably eat more than anything else in the lake. Surprised how many lakes where the biggest fish is the least caught, which doesn't make any sense, does it? But that's because I also think they're a bit, not smart is the wrong word, but I think they've learnt how to eat more than everything else for less risk. Yes. I think that it's just a natural thing. So anyway, Fireman Sam, he's had Mr. Angry, next to me, totally with my blessing. I've encouraged him to fish every day. Anyway, he's not finished taking the pictures. I'm taking the pictures of it. He's not finished taking the pictures. People are messaging me, he's had it off your spot, he's had it over your bait, he dropped the fish, didn't he? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Just people looking to find something wrong with the capture. They're not even on the lake, and I'm there looking at the fish. It's not been dropped. It's not been caught off my spot. It's been caught fair and square, and maybe it would have been it was shitting out my bait, so it had definitely been near my spot at some point. But the point is I learned from that capture enough to help me have that capture later on. If your default reaction to that is resentment, let's try and find fault in it. Oh, he's caught it off someone else's hard work, or he's dropped the fish, or he's done this, or he's done that, which is so common in carp fishing. I just don't get it. Like you just, what we spoke about at the start during our philosophy session was just being open-minded to gather all data and information that's out there.
Why do you think that is? Do you think people
I think
to make themselves feel better about themselves?
Exactly that. They have miserable, pathetic lives that they're resentful about. They vent that in other people. Oh, he hosts a podcast for a living. I wish we could all do that. I have to work 60 hours a week in a shitty job that I hate. It's like, well, you can change your life. It's not going to make it any better by slagging my life off, because I've made sacrifices to be able to live this life that I'm making of my choice. And get me wrong, my life in particular, I've had a lot of this over the years because I've led an unconventional life. I haven't worked a conventional job, and I've done my share of shitty jobs, and warehouse work, being treated like crap for £60 a week, for 48 hours of hard graft. But I've engineered a life with its ups and downs, of my own choosing, and it ain't an easy life. You've got to be mentally tough for it. You can be flavour of the minute, earning money once, and then be jobless the next, because you're self-employed. You're kind of like, it ain't no picnic. No, I can assure you. But it's easy for someone else to say, oh, he's got more fishing time than me. That's what he's got a bait deal. That's why he catches fish. Like you don't get a bait deal without putting your bollocks on the line and doing the goods. All this period I'm talking about now. Just as I got to this lake, I was getting bait off Gary, but I was buying it. It wasn't free bait or anything. In them days, the Elstow fish, all that kind of work, hard work. That's what gets you to a position where some company thinks you have value for them, and then that value, as you know, at Korda, it comes with work. You've got to attend shows, you've got to travel, you've got to do stuff, you've got to make appearances. Right? Nothing's for free. Like there is no easy money, is there? And to live a life of your choosing quite often comes with sacrifices. We all know Terry Earn talking about begging sausages at the gates of Yateley, to live.
You're living by your instincts more, aren't you, as well? I mean, a lot of people don't like to. They like to feel a bit safer, don't they, and secure in their lives. And what you do, and
that's not wrong at all. I know people that are geniuses that have been very good at a particular skill, and I'm like, if you were on your own, you'd absolutely clean up. They're like, nope, I want to go home at 5 o'clock and not worry about it till 9 o'clock the next morning. And some people, everyone's different. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is also no shortcut to anything. You've kind of got to do it. And that fireman Sam Mark is his actual name. That example of him catching that fish, and I'm looking at the fish taking the pictures, and they're trying to pick fault in it. Oh, he had it off your spot, didn't he? It's like, no, he didn't.
Do you know another one with that, when you see pictures being taken and one of the guys that stood there taking the pictures goes, I had that last year. It's like, oh God.
There's an even worse one at the minute that seems to be a social media thing, and that's when somebody puts a picture up of their fish, and then literally every comment afterwards is like someone putting a picture up of it. Can be an unrelated fish, it's just like, oh, I had this on Saturday. It's like
you don't get that with match fishing, Toad, do you?
No,
just a keep net full of fish.
But anyway, I've only gone down this road because this particular capture, which I'm getting too very long-winded, I took a lot of grief for it, because there's a lot of people fish that lake as I did without ever seeing a fish or whatever, or maybe knew because they were friends of Ev or whatever, and knew what was in there. The bitterness that came from me having a result on there was incredible. It was toxic, and it was forums in them days, kind of before Facebook and stuff. To finish this session, so the next time I got back, I knew the bait was working. the boilies as well as just the kind of normal feed. I'd had a bite. I was full of confidence. The wind was blowing up the other end. This swim that was technically out of bounds but wasn't. That's where the wind was blowing. So I was like, right, okay, how can I navigate this? So I set up on the last legal peg, set a bivvy up there. I took 4 rods with me. I thought I'll fish 2 in this swim just in the daytimes, and then in the morning I'll set my alarm for first light, and I walk around there with 2 rods, a rucksack and a mat, and I'll literally fish 3 or 4 hours. So the first morning I thought, right, I'll just check for dog walkers. So I didn't fish the first morning. I always try and do 3 nights when I go fishing. So the first morning I thought I'll just recce it, go and throw a few handfuls of bait in. I hadn't even put a lead out in this area, but it was just a bowl, like a silk bowl, so I knew it was going to be okay. The only thing I was worried about was, have I been baiting like 2 foot of water? That was kind of the only concern. So that first morning I walked around there with half a bucket of bait and a marker rod, and just flicked out kind of into the areas that I'd been like scooping bait in like for the previous 3 or 4 weeks, and it was perfect. It was exactly as I thought it was. It was sort of 10-12 foot deep, and it was quite firm as well, which I was like, ooh, was it always firm, or have the fish done that? Either way, it doesn't really matter. That's where I'm fishing, that's where I've been baiting. So I did that the first morning, walked back round, fished all day, set my alarm for 3 o'clock the following morning, because we're getting into spring now, so it's visibly looking light at sort of 3. Next morning, gone around there with 2 rods and an unhooking mat, really long bank sticks, put the rods in the water so they can't be seen. Sort of sat there a bit nervous, feeling like I'm somewhere that I shouldn't be. And it was, I think I'd heard somebody on the path. It must have been like, I was like, how long am I going to give this in the morning? Like, dog walkers coming at 8 o'clock or 8:30. What am I going to do? But nothing had happened. I was like, I walked back to the path, kind of where in fact they called it the beach, that grassy area. They called it the beach, like along to the boathouse. And just as I've got there, I've heard an alarm screaming, and it's deafening. It's ripping through the lake. I'm like, whoa. That's me. There's nobody else. Anyway, so I've gone back to the rod and waded out into the water. And we're right on rod, like the bobbin's off, and it's right out in the middle. I mean, I'd only walked like 25 yards, but kind of through undergrowth, just to look out for dog walkers, thinking I'm going to have to reel in soon. It's like, it must have been nearly 9 o'clock in the morning. I've left it as long as I could. Thought, right, I'll come back tomorrow morning. Anyway, pick the rod up now, wondering, because it stopped ripping by the time I've got back to it. I'm like, is there a fish on? Is there not? Boom. Oh, yes. It's there. And I just remember stood sort of waist deep in water, thinking, wow. And I'm cranking it back. It's all in open water. There's no weed or nothing. It's just pretty heavy.
Is there any difference between, so hooking a fish there and previous fish that you've
yes, it's not even comparable. It was, I got it to about 25 yards out and it rolled on the surface, and I seen it was a big common. So bearing in mind, I've had 2 40-pounders now the previous year, but they're both like scrapers. So I think 40-pound 8 ounce and 42 something. And this was every bit as big as them. Do you know what I mean? Plus, it could be a record. It's from a lake nobody catches fish from, and the rumours are 2 big commons and a record mirror. That they were the rumours. I've just seen a big fucking common roll 20 yards out. Apologies if I'm not allowed to swear. You can bleep it out. And
he swears all the time.
All right, fair enough.
I've cut my language down, thanks.
And anyway, this is the only time ever to this day in carp fishing. I know I was shaking. I was like hyperventilating, fuck me, you know what I mean? Anyway, it went in the net pretty easy. I looked at it and it's a 40-pound common. I didn't know how big it was, but I knew, I'd seen 40-pounders now. I knew what it looked like. That feeling was incredible. And anybody I think I rang Simon Crowe that morning. I rang Roger, obviously. I rang Alex to come down and do the pictures. I didn't know what was in the lake, what was left to catch. I've just caught a really big fish. Bearing in mind, this is 20 years ago almost, so it's equivalent of catching an unknown upper 50 now, I would say, the equivalent. From a place Terry Earns told you that you ain't going to catch him, because his mate would have done. He does come into this story, yeah.
Okay.
So I've the feeling's incredible. I remember ringing Dave Levy as well, because I think he'd introduced me to Basie at Nash, and he was kind of, you know, instrumental in that, jumping up the ladder of my career at the time. Anyway, everyone to this day, if they tell you about that phone call, I just couldn't speak. It's like just not being able to get words out. Anyway, I've sorted it all out. I've sacked it up. I've about to take all the gear back round the other side for the day, and then waiting for Alex he was a landscape gardener at the time, for him to get off a job and come and take the pictures. And I've looked at the other rod. The other rod's like, something's happened to it. I'm like,
what?
The bobbin's gone. I'm like, hey, I've picked it up. Bear in mind, it's all out in the water and it's been calamity, and the line's like going up the margin the opposite way to I'd cast it. Like, I was like, it's been picked up. There's some fish has picked this up. Anyway, so I've got in the water up to my waist, like just on the edges of the trees that were there. It was sort of waist deep. I've waded up and then picked the line from round a branch, and it's gone all the way back, like down the other margin. I've picked that up and it's gone all the way back again. I'm like, this is a fish, like 100%. Wow. And anyway, when I got to the actual hook, it was just in a branch. That was it. So, but I'd definitely been done. Like at some point during either the battle or the commotion or
so
making the phone calls, I had 2 rods there and they're both gone.
You had 3 bites on that lake then, and you've...
well, yes, up to this point, yeah, because the other one was the previous session, yeah. And I've no idea what it was, but I was like, wow. Anyway, so Alex has come and done the pictures. I've gone round the other side for the day, bit of a celebration with myself, you know, cooked a nice fry up or something, set the alarm. I've got one more night left, so I set my alarm for 3 o'clock the following morning to do exactly the same thing again. I've repeated everything that I did the morning before. Got up at 3 in the morning, put 2 rods out. Anyway, 8:30 in the morning, get another bite, and it's... rods are in the water, so they can't be seen if any dog walk or anything walks out there. So I've gone into the water. I've grabbed the net. The net's between my legs. I'm playing this fish, and the net slipped, you know, down, and it's pretty deep. Like you know, it's above waist height, I think, where I am now. But because it's getting quite late in the morning, like I can see a dog walker walking along the beach area, and I don't know. In hindsight, it was probably fine. They wouldn't have known if I was supposed to be there, not supposed to be there. As it turns out, I was probably allowed to be there anyway. Like people had fished there for years, as I said. But I'm trying to like back myself into the bushes, like playing this fish. You know, a fish from like the impossible as well. I've still got another one. I don't know if I've already caught the biggest fish in the lake, the smallest of the big uns. Like who knows what could be on the end. And then, but I've now not got a net, and I'm up to my waist in water trying to hide from these dog walkers walking down the beach. So my rod tip's like in the bushes now. I'm like worried about that, like snapping the line or anything. Anyway, I end up playing it in. Dog walkers have gone, so I've kind of moved into the gap where the actual rods were, and I'm like, how am I going to land this fish? All this time, 10 minutes, I'm feeling about my feet in the water, trying to actually feel the net. Net's gone. Like no chance. It's sunk into the silt or whatever. I don't really know. Never found it, but I'm like, what am I going to do about this fish? The only thing I can do is play it out till it's absolutely knackered and just scoop it up in my arms. I'm literally going to have to play it into my feet and scooped it, which is what I did. It worked perfectly. Once the fish was about 10 yards out, I thought, I'm not going to let it come any closer. I'm just going to literally dog on a lead and let it do whatever it wants for 5 or 10 minutes. Absolutely exhaust itself.
Jeez.
And then pulled it in, and as I got it close, it worked because it was totally knackered, and I literally just scooped it and ran up the side.
I've been in that
bank.
position before, and it didn't play ball with me like that. But
I've done it a couple of times. But the key is not to try and get it in. Is to try and let it knacker itself out, 10, 20 yards out. I've done it a couple of times.
I've had it with a 40-pounder where it came over the net. And I had one of those Free Spirit landing nets. Yeah. It went in and I lifted it up, and as I lifted it up, both the arms just cracked. And then went for another swim round the leg.
A guy on one of our trips in Croatia did that to a 70-pounder. It's our nets as well, because obviously we'd hired them all the gear. He'd had a few fish that day. He hadn't pushed them back in properly. Yeah. And he's landed his biggest fish of the trip. I think he had another bite. It was all chaos at the time. He had, I think, another rod had gone at the time anyway. He ended up having a 70-pounder swim out the net. Yeah, he was pretty gutted. So anyway, yeah, I've landed this fish. It turned out to be the smallmouth mirror, which
we got some pictures, Toby. We got the other one as well now.
What an incredible fish that smallmouth mirror was.
Yeah.
It was its frame was tiny, and I think this is where the rumours of record fish come from, because it was the only fish that had a weight attributed to it. That's it.
That's a smallmouth. Yeah.
It was the size of a 25-pound fish, but it was just solid. I've never to this day felt another fish like it.
Yeah.
It felt heavy when you lifted up. I think it was like 31.1 or something, which is the same weight it was when the bream angler caught it like 10 years before. Apparently, it had always been that size.
So was that meant to be the real big one then? Was
No. That was the only one that anybody had a weight of,
right?
Because this bream angler, whose name we know, Roger knew him personally, or still does, he'd had this fish and one other carp while fishing for the record bream that lived in there years ago. He'd had this fish at 31. Now it's quite recognisable because it's got a tiny mouth. So when people have seen it in the water, they've seen the first fish that I caught, which was the banana common. That looks a good 20 pound bigger than it, but it was, except that one has got the frame of a 25 pounder. So yeah, that was the first fish, the banana common. It was over 40 pound, which was a huge fish for the time. Absolute bar of gold. It looks yellow in the water, which is why they always called it the banana common.
Who gave it the name?
I think Ev probably, or that group of people that were fishing the lake around that time. So what happened is that I've now landed 3 and lost that first one, and I've actually lost another because both the rods had gone the morning before when I had this banana common. So I've gone home, got the pictures developed, as you know, because these were old school pictures. There was no digital cameras.
They came out all right though, didn't they?
Yeah, they were good.
Really well.
Alex did a great job on the pictures, and obviously you've got a decent scanner in, so it's come up all right. So the following week I've come back. As I've got home from this session, I'm obviously elated. I've had 2, including a 40 pound common, which is a huge fish, for them days, especially in the north. And there's a letter on the mat when I got in. I opened it and it's my Yateley ticket. It's the car park ticket's come a year early. Like it was just like fate. So I've got there, a few conversations with Alex and people. Everyone who saw it, not many people found out about it. There's a few people that I rang on the morning, like Crowy and stuff. And then Alex, anyway, they said that's the banana common, like it's yellow, it's unmistakable. That's the fish that the rumours are. So technically I've caught the biggest fish in the lake. There's possibly a mirror, but it's not much bigger. Made total sense after catching the smallmouth mirror that why everybody thought it was 50-60 pound, this fish, because the smallmouth should have been 25 pound, but yeah, it was 31 because it was just packed solid. But if that's your only benchmark to compare others to, there was the other common. The rumours were right, by the way. There was 2 big commons and a mirror. The rumours were actually correct, as were the Tatton Park rumours. The only one's not proven yet by me is the third place that Roger was on about. I'm not going to mention the name. You have to rewind it to find out because I'm already a bit gutted I said it. The other mirror.
Okay.
But so I've gone back. I've decided I've probably caught the biggest fish. I'll go back and do one more session because the car park starts on the 1st of June, I think it was, that ticket starts. And I'll go back because there still might be other fish and I've got something going on the bait. Gone back the following week. I've decided this time I'm not going to do the palaver of setting up, like 800 yards away and then just walking around at 3 o'clock in the morning with 2 rods. I found a little clearing in there was like a holly bush with a gap in there that looked the size of a bivvy. Right, I think I've given you a picture of it actually. So I thought I went to the Army and Navy shop. I bought some camo netting that looked like holly as well. And I set my bivvy up in the middle of this little clearing, put the camo netting over the front. There we go. Yeah, you can't see
where
it.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You can just see it sort of.
This reminds me of the other Mere, Jamie, a little bit. The whole thing with this.
Yeah, and ironically, there's 1 letter difference in the alphabet between the two, Colemere and Colemere.
Yeah.
They're almost identical. A lot of people, when you talk about them, get them confused.
They do, yeah.
So this following week, because I decided this was going to be my last session, I thought I'll just set up. If I get caught, I get caught. I'm not coming back. So I set up in here. I'm still a bit nervous, you're still doing something that you don't really want to get caught. But I wanted to fish the full 3 days, like with my rods out, because obviously the fish were there. They're on the bait, and who knows what else is in this lake? I didn't know these fish existed. I didn't know the name of it. I didn't know the big one was the banana common. Didn't know anything till I caught it, and then other people told me. So it's my first day. And I see what looks like an angler walking across the beach where I'd seen the dog walker the previous week when I had the fish. But he had a bucket in his hand. So I'm like, it's an angler. I'm sure it is. So I'm now starting to shit it. I've rung Roger up, gone like, someone's coming and they're coming in here. I think they're an angler. They're just making a beeline for where I am. And even though the bivvy was pretty hidden, like an angler would find the rods and stuff in the water. And as it got closer, I'd met Ev at Christmas when they came up for the Terry Hearn talk. I'd met him then, but we were absolutely levered that night. And I'm looking at a distance, him walking over. I'm like, I think it's Ev, but I'm not sure. I think it's Ev. Anyway, he came in to where I was. The second he saw me, that I was there and fishing, he literally turned around and bolted off. Before I shouted him, hey, to talk to him, and he's gone. I'm now like, fuck. I don't want to mess up this situation I've got. Who knows what I might catch in here. I can't get bubbled up and lose the opportunity. But on the other hand, this is a bad situation. So I ring Terry just to see if it is Ev. Rung Terry, his answer, but I'm now in a dilemma. Do I tell Terry that I've had these fish or not? Because I don't really want to ruin the opportunity I've got. Anyway, I thought I've got to tell Terry the truth. I've got to tell him that I've caught fish from Colemere, which was like, and he was like, you what? I need to tell Ev.
But they only feed on naturals.
I said, well, I think it's Ev has just walked up and caught me in this swim next to the beach, the out of bounds swim. I think Ev's there, and I knew there was a bailiff that wasn't a bailiff. He's like somebody who's kind of looked over the lake and lived nearby. I forget his name now. It might have been Ian or someone, but I knew Ev was really close with this guy, and I thought, if it is Ev or whoever it is, if they want to fish this swim, all they got to do is go and tell their mate, like the bailiff guy, who's going to come and boot me off. I'm out on my ear, and they're going to catch the fish if there is any fish to be caught. All these things are going through my head. I'm like, what do I do? So I said, look, Terry, I've had 2 fish, lost another 2. I've got the pictures here. Just tell Ev, this is my last session. I think it's him, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Ev. So I now know what happened. He did go in there. He did have the what had happened is he'd come down for his first recce mission over the weekend. So between now and when I caught the fish last week, he's mooched over the weekend. First place he's gone is onto this area because that's apparently where the fish wake up. It's where he'd watched them over the years in the spring. He's seen all the fish showing, including the ones that I caught, and he saw the big mirror and it had scales off its side. He told me this afterwards. His first impression was somebody's lost that fish. He said that's what it looked like. Obviously, I've lost a fish, haven't I? That morning that was up there. So I may well have caught them all that morning.
Oh my God.
Anyway, he's thought this is unusual to see the fish. Like in all them 7 years, he hasn't had that many chances, even though he has seen them regular. So he's come back on the Monday to fish, full of beans, thinking I've seen the fish. Bloody hell, this is the year maybe I'll catch him. He's walked into that swim and there I am. He's stewing. He's obviously steam coming out of his ears. Apparently he's gone back to his car to have a smoke, sit down and chill. And he wouldn't even answer the phone to Terry. Terry's rung him 10 times now. I'm ringing Terry going, have you got hold of him yet? What's going on? I'm panicking. And obviously Ev's just gone to chill out. He's eventually answered the phone to Terry, and Terry's told him 10 minutes sort of after Terry had actually got hold of him, which is probably an hour or two now with me flapping, am I getting booted off? What's happening? He came back with a spring in his step. He was bouncing along the beach. It's what I said before about some people can take something resentfully and some people can use it as a positive. He was happy. The first thing he said, you got the pictures then? Didn't say another word, didn't say hello or anything. He went, you got the pictures then? I got them out, showed them to him. He shook my hand. He wouldn't shake my hand or congratulate him until he'd seen the pictures. Really? So he knew that I wasn't bullshitting or lying. And he was made up for me. He couldn't have been happier. He was like, they're catchable. He was buzzing.
Jeez.
He was really... Anyway,
I mean, he must have been devastated a bit for himself. I mean,
I don't know.
To spend all that time on that lake.
Yeah, but it's not a competition, is it?
No,
it's not like I've exclusively caught something, now he can't catch them. He went on to catch the banana.
Well, clearly he saw it the other way.
About a month, yeah, as I would, and probably you would. You're a positive person. Not everybody's like that. You have two choices of how you're going to take that news. Not only did you think you were walking into a golden opportunity, you've seen the fish there over the weekend. Someone else is in your swim. Not only that, but they've actually had two of the fish that you saw. Like, there's two ways of dealing with that information, like positively or negatively, and it's a testament to Ev. I was gobsmacked. I'd like to say I'd have been as positive as he was. I probably wouldn't have been, He was great. Anyway, he said he was coming to fish. I was like, go and get your gear. He said, well, there's room enough here for two of us. We'll have a bit of a session tonight. I'll cook your dinner. Like, he was notorious for living on Mars bars and bottles of water. Like, I don't think he
liked using Vitalin, didn't he? As well,
he was known for that. I think he used groats on Yateley Car Park years ago. He had them going mentally on groats, in front of everybody, sort of thing. And I really like. I've got a lot of respect for him. He didn't want to fish. He didn't want to interrupt on my. It was absolute etiquette. He didn't want to interrupt on my fishing. I was like, look, he confirmed that I had caught the banana, like the biggest fish. And I was like, look, my car park tickets come. Terry's on there this year. We go down for the draw next week. Like, this is my last session. I said, just fish tonight, like, which he did. We had a good session. I cooked him a full cooked breakfast. Cooked him dinner that night. Full cooked breakfast in the morning. Anyway, he's still asleep in the morning. I've had a screamer again, same spot.
Gee.
And I've played this fish from the same area that I caught the banana. Played it, landed it. I'm shouting him to wake him up. He's finally woke up. He's come over, and he didn't. Even though he knows what's happened, he didn't believe that I had another fish. Like, he's kind of walking over and going, what do you want? What's going on? I'm like, I've got one. You know, what, fish? like amazed sort of thing. I was like, yeah. She's like, whoa. Come over, looked in the net. This is how I knew that he'd been watching them fish for years. He looked straight in the net and went, that's bully. That's the other comment, basically. He didn't know how big it was. This fish had never been caught, ever, by anyone. There's rumours that the banana had been caught once. We know the smallmouth mirror had been caught a couple of times. This fish had definitely never seen the bank. And I've never heard of it being caught since.
We're looking at it now, aren't we? Another solid looking common, that.
Yeah, quite fat as well.
Yeah, really fat.
It's a natural lake. They've never really had bait. And that fish never been caught before or afterwards, as far as I know.
Hasn't it?
It's
No.
the only capture ever. I think Carpology did a piece on it once, that those, the kind of the myths, the ones that never get caught, literally. And it is possible the banana got caught before I caught it, like some years before. I've still never seen a picture or got a name or anything, but the people that know that lake really well, that had fished it from childhood, that were from Shropshire, they reckon there was one capture of the banana before I caught it. But no captures of this fish ever.
No captures.
Just got seen regular.
And you think that your time fishing there just coincided with a change in the water?
Well, I don't know. I was full of beans. I was confident. Once I'd had a bite and once I saw him, I just knew I was going to catch the fish. Like, I was just like, they're catchable. But obviously, I've had this conversation with Ev. I was like, why? And he said this year's different. That he'd walked up that weekend, seen the fish show in. He knew this was a different year to all the other years. And he said the previous year, where he had actually had one fish during that 7 years, he said that year was like that. He was seeing them. There was bits on the surface. The lake was alive compared to all the other years. He said the years after that, he knew he was going through the motions. Like, the lake was dead. The bream vanished, presumably dead. I don't know why. Maybe I was just lucky that year was a year the lake came alive. And testament, Ev caught the fish from that swim, like just after spawning. I think it was under 40, but it was, a couple of months later, within a couple of months.
But the same year. Yeah. What happened to the fish in there, do you think?
The rumoured they got ottered. There is rumours as
very long after this.
A couple of years after. So what happened is some guy took it over as a private syndicate, and you could use boats and all sorts on there. And Wall guy, one of the ZZ Top guys that I'd met that day, I think he might have even caught it twice, but I think somebody had it at a decent weight. I can't remember if it went 50, but once anglers started fishing it, then when they knew these fish were catchable, obviously bait went in and stuff, and they did get a bit bigger. Wall had it once or maybe even twice. I think it did 2 captures, maybe.
So your catches, I mean, was it just word of mouth that got round then after that?
I kept it quiet for a few months. Again, all the knockers, he's waiting for the prizes to be good in Carp Talk. The bullshit that I heard after that was like, I did keep it quiet for a little bit, but not that long. Like, and the people who needed to know knew, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do
you feel you want to share a capture like that with people anyway? I mean, it's a bit wasted otherwise.
One of the reasons why I've considered doing a book now and actually telling the story is because it's like if you read A Waiting for Waddle or one of these old classic books, and they're talking about 18-pounders and being elated for it, it means nothing now, does it? Because every single carp angler in this country has caught an 18-pounder, and we're getting to the point now where that fish there is probably equivalent to catching an unknown mid-50 common now, from somewhere. It's equivalent to when the Burfield fish turned up huge, Like, it's the equivalent of that, but every lake's got a 40-pounder in now. Most syndicates have got 50s in now. So we're getting to the point where if that story doesn't get told properly soon, and this is the first time I really told it publicly. I told it in a slideshow, but not in this detail.
Thank you very much.
We're on. We'll take the exclusive.
But you could talk about these stories, like even like Mary and stuff nowadays, and those old sort of, and to some people, it's like it doesn't really sink in the magnitude of that and catching.
And the facts from the north as well. Like,
yes.
Like it was a nationwide big story. The anglers that knew, like your Terrys, and I know Dave Mallin sent Stez, who was one of the Shropshire guys. He was one of Ev's mates that did know about the actual existence of these fish, which I didn't. There were rumours. He sent Stez a message. The calibre of Dave Mallin, like he's a true secret big fish sort of hunter over the years, and I think the message he sent was the myth has now become legend, which will be the name of the chapter, of that book. Myth becomes legend. It's like, for people of his calibre to be treating it with that sort of importance at the time, it was big news at the time, but only to the people that knew. Like, if you didn't know the extent of that lake, every big fish low stock angler in the country had had a look at that lake and written it off.
No, it had a notorious reputation.
It's impossible.
It did.
7 carp in 90 acres, we believe there was, and I hooked 5 of them.
Mental.
In a short period of time. Which,
do you think, looking back now, that was quite typical that you were going to catch them maybe all at the same time or find them all in the same place like that?
I think, you definitely get winters. That's the thing with this low stock fishing, is there's lots of periods of nothing, and then when you get an opportunity, like, you do normally capitalise on it, because they're not expecting to be caught. And it turned out right. I'm confident I'd have caught them from whichever way the wind was blowing. I think I'd have caught them from that area, because I had a bite up the opposite end of the lake on the session before. I think there might have been a gap between the 2 sessions. There would have been, because it would have been Easter. As I said, when I'd had that first bite and I met Wal, that would have been Good Friday, and I wouldn't have fished that week. I'd have been really busy with work, and I'd have had my daughter on school holidays as well. So that's probably why I drove up just to bait on that week in between and then fished the week after. But you do normally get windows, and everything happens within a short window, and then get periods of nothing where you're sort of not on the fish. That's definitely very common with low stock lakes, I think.
But the irony is that Yateley comes along straight after that as well.
Yeah, what a world of difference that was.
Well, I said to you the other day, did you enjoy that year on the Car Park Lake? And it's like, no, it's like... Oh.
Not really. I mean, we could spend another 2 hours just talking about that year, because there's quite a lot of stories that you've probably already had other versions of the same story from Darrell and stuff. Darrell and I fished a few lakes at the same time. St Ives, we were on there at the same time. Yateley, which is kind of the year that really elevated Darrell. That situation where Darrell caught his first one, chunky was it, from the bars. He probably didn't know, because he normally came on a Tuesday, I think, and I came after DJing on Sunday night, so I got there first light on a Monday. And it was the year that Terry Earn had gone back, and all the full-timers were on there. They actually banned full-time fishing because of that season. They made a 48-hour rule off the back of that year. So you had a lot of anglers on there fishing full-time. What happened is they all chose a peg and they left each other to that swim. So Terry fished Trumptons like every week. John Claridge was in the one just on the left of Trumptons. I can't remember the name of it. John Mack was on there that year.
God, you picked a good year to get on there, didn't you?
Another John guy who just had the Conningbrook fish at British record, 60 something. John, can anyone remember his name? Jon John as well. He was spelt, I think. He just had the Conningbrook fish at 60. Anyway, he was on there. It was a load. It was a who's who that year. Darren Miles was one of them. Anyway, so I'd gone from having a 100-acre lake to myself, like whatever day I turned up, let alone Monday morning. I was now arriving first light on a Monday morning, which paid off well on Elstow. It paid off well everywhere I'd ever fished. And I was now on 12th choice or 13th choice on a Monday. So what was happening, the full-timers were fishing Sunday. They were taking over the swims from the weekenders on the Sunday. They were fishing till Friday, pulling off for the weekenders, going home, showering, and then coming back on the Saturday to wait a night for the swim for the Sunday. So it was just impossible to beat them. They all kind of, unwritten rule, but they all left each other to their swim, all in the prime swims. And there was 2 or 3 swims available every week. So there's quite a lot of swims on the car park for a small lake. One of them was the dugout. That actually did at least 3 fish, including Heather, that year. If I'd have just chose a dugout, which I could have done, and then just stuck to that, everyone would have probably left me alone, and there's a chance I'd have had the 3 or 4 fish. I did have one out of there. I had the small comment on the Yateley Yahoo video. I remember the original one with all the sort of old school.
Was that with Richie on it?
Yeah,
with the Lilo and stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that one that somebody catches a comment about. I forget how big it was now. It was. Yeah. £18, £19, £70, I can't remember. Anyway, that comment's like got more history than probably Arthur or Heather. Anyway, I caught that one out the dugout swim. Steve Pagulatos took the pictures. He just caught the black mirror. In fact, opening night of Yateley that year. I mean, for a northerner to be thrown in the middle of carp history, the opening night. So it would have been. I think the draw was on June the 1st. You all go down for a barbecue, and then you can take the swim over, bait your swim for a week or however long, and then you all start fishing on whatever day it was, 15th of June, I can't remember, or if the draw was a week before the 1st of June start, doesn't matter. Anyway, that opening night we're all on the lake. Obviously I'm a bit out my depth. You got your Terrys and everybody on there.
Did you fill out your depth then?
Yeah, I did. I was still quite young and naive. Yeah, I did. Even though I just had a blind in 12 months, sort of done the impossible on 2 separate waters. It was a complete culture shock. I also now, the things that gave me advantage, like watching the fish, getting there, getting the swims that I wanted, that was now all out the window. And, you know, Pagulatos had most of the mirrors the year before, so he was a bit of a legend. He'd now gone on to Colemere for the black mirror. Anyway, opening night, we're all on there, and he's caught the black mirror on the opening night of Yateley. One thing I'll regret is not forcing my way in there to go with him. Everybody left the car park and went down for the pictures. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, even though I didn't really know anyone that well, I'm pretty sure I could have gone if I'd have wanted to, but that's one of the few regrets I have in my life is not.
You just needed to be there a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I saw the pictures afterwards.
That's on video, isn't it, actually? Have I seen that recently on YouTube?
Yeah, there is a video of it, I think. But yeah, that Yateley thing, there was a swim called the Bars that hadn't done a fish for 2 years. And I think John Mack had upset the apple cart, so he'd come on a different day and took a different swim. So he'd basically, this routine of everyone getting in the main swims on a Sunday and leaving on a Friday, that had been thrown out of kilter. Anyway, I arrived on the Monday morning and the curly was free, but I'd pre-baited the bars for 2 weeks. Everyone knew I was doing it. Nobody wanted the swim because it hadn't done a fish for 2 years, which is why I thought, what do I do best? Pre-baiting, it's worked for me, at great lengths on a number of times. I'm going to do that. Anyway, baited this for a few weeks. I've come there about to fish the bars for the first time, and the curly's free. It's like, hey, that's not right. Who's not here? And I think John Mack had actually turned up on a Saturday and got a swim, so he'd thrown the swim rotation around a little bit, and it ended up the curly was free. I was like, I was going to fish the bars. I've been pre-baiting it, but this might be the only chance to get to go in the curly this year. It wasn't even a spring-summer swim, it was an autumn swim. Anyway, so I've stood in the curly, I've looked, not seen nothing. I walked into the bars, which was actually the next swim, but it was behind trees. You had to kind of like go away from the lake, walk along the path, not being able to see the lake, and then walk into the bar swim. I've looked out, stood there for 15, 20 minutes. It's first light, sort of time you expect to see a fish. Saw nothing, turned around, walked back to the curly. Did this 3 or 4 times. Eventually thought, sod it, I can go. Nobody wants the bars, I can go in that anytime. I'll go back to the curly. I'll go in the curly. Might be the only chance I get. Gone back to the car, got my gear. As I'm setting up in the curly, I see Terry Earn in the bars. I'm like, what are you doing? You fish Trumptons like on the other side of the lake. He went, I thought you'd seen him. He went, every time you turn your back and walk out of the bars, one showed like 20 yards out. I'm like, he said the third one was as you were turning. He said, so I thought you'd seen it.
Did he tell you what it was?
Then you went and got your gear.
Yeah.
He said you went and got your gear. So he said, I thought, Jamie's seen that last one. Anyway, then you set up in curly. So I was like, I can't ignore the opportunity. So he's left his Trumptons, got over there. I was like, fuck. Like literally, there were not many chances to be had for me that year. Arriving on a Monday, getting last choice of swim, and I just buggered. Well, I hadn't done anything wrong. It was literally a twist of fate. We were talking when you came to my house the other day. We were talking about determinism and free will. Like, is everything preordained, fate-wise? I truly believe I was not meant to have that year, and Darryl was. Don't get me wrong. He probably maximised it way more than I could. He's an extremely brilliant angler. Like, he caught 3, whereas I might have caught 1 if I was lucky, and I might have shook it off at the net or something, but anyway, that twist of fate, that I was so close to seeing him, and I would have had 3 or 4 nights in that swim, and I'd have probably gone sick at work that weekend if I'd have known. So Terry Earn's setting up in there. He tells me tight lines are pestering him to go to tight lines, and he didn't really want to do it at the time. I don't think he was really stuck into Yateley. Anyway, first light the next morning, I'm kicking myself for missing out on this opportunity. First light the next morning, see Darryl setting up in there. I'm like, hey? Terry fishes for a week. Anyway, he decided to do tight lines, so he packed up at first light. As he was leaving the car park, because Darryl probably wouldn't have gone in the bars, as he was leaving the car park, Darryl's had a chat with him in the car park, and he's told him the story that I'm in the curly, but the fish nutting like hell in the bars. Darryl's gone in the bars and had chunky. Now Darryl knew. I don't know if he knew I'd been pre-baiting or not. Everyone else did, like people like Lewis Reed.
How much bait did you put out by that point?
Quite a bit. I was putting buckets at a time.
Yeah.
Like over 2 to 3 weeks, I think.
Sorry, was that particle or boilie you were putting?
It will have been mixed. I was using the Fen mix on there again because I'd just come off Fen Drayton. And Darryl may or may not have known. I didn't speak to Darryl much up until this point. We sort of became friendly after. So whether he knew I'd been baiting or not, it's neither here nor there. Terry Earn, the god, I know Darryl looked up to Terry in them days. And Terry's like literally just giving him the golden goose. Oh, the swim I've just come out of, I've got fishing nutting all over it. I've got to go and do tight lines. But yeah, fill your boots.
Is that common in there for fish to stay in an area for like 24 hours like that?
No, it's unusual. But it was obvious to me that it was a swim that no one was fishing.
Yeah.
Plus I'd pre-baited it. Anyway, Darryl's gone in it, had chunky, and then the following week I'm thinking, right, okay, well, Darryl comes on a Tuesday, I come on a Saturday. Obviously Darryl is also, you got to get out of bed pretty early to beat him. He's gone sick at work as well and got there on the Sunday knowing that I've got a gig Sunday night and it's impossible for me to get there. I think he's kind of spoke about that maybe on your podcast.
Yeah, he did mention it. Seeing the fish fizzing up on the spot and stuff like that.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, will not take anything away. He probably made a much better opportunity than I would have done, in that same circumstance. I've heard the story of the fizzing up, and he knows that one cast could have ruined it all if he did the cast wrong. Make no bones about it, I'm not taking any.
Well, I mean, he was fishing differently, wasn't he, as well? So.
Yeah, he was fishing big boilies. Although I was fishing boilies, they told me when I first walked on there, you won't catch a fish out of here on a boilie. Obviously, I'm going to use boilies. When someone says that to me, it's that opposite thing. Darryl went a stage further, knowing what he knows, using 20 millis straight out the bag. Which he was like, it's logical. They're big fish and they're hungry. These guys are shaving down tiger nuts and putting 10 grains of hemp in the back of a boat. I'm going to put 5 key 20 millis out, and obviously it worked for him.
So you said about it was a bit of a culture shock fishing Yateley compared to your other campaigns.
Yeah, I didn't get my own way. There was a lot of good anglers. The first time I felt like I was fishing, I did have one as I said, in the summer. I had comment off the Yateley Yahoo video, the original one, but I never really felt close. There were opportunities, as I said, that dugout swim. I think Terry re-caught Heather from that dugout swim. It is a swim I fished probably more than any others, and in hindsight, if I'd have stuck to it, it did do 3 or 4 bites that year. Some good ones, but I didn't feel like I was fishing properly until the winter, when kind of the majority of people went. I think there was 4 of us that stuck it out. There were people that came and went at weekends, but midweek when I was fishing Monday to Thursday, there was 4 of us. And what happened is we kind of, a bit like the full-timers had like stuck to their own swims during the year, we kind of picked a quarter of the lake each. So if you imagine like what's Carp Park, maybe 8 acres or something, 8-9 acres, we like split it into quarters basically, which gave us all 3 or 4 swims within our quarter.
Who were you fishing with at the time? Who was on there?
Darren Miles did the whole winter. I think Numpty Mark was there a bit. There were people that came and went. Might have dropped in the other swims. I think Rick Harrison stuck around, but I forget who it was. But it was generally 4 of us, and I kind of, because this was never spoke about. It's just kind of what happened. I inherited the quarter of the lake with the dugout swim in it. And it's no coincidence that the first time I actually felt I was fishing properly was, when I could actually fish, choose a swim based on information or based on seeing something or hearing something in the night. There was an opportunity to move, and there was odd fish showing. They were showing in the night. We were getting up regular, but I had single scale in December, and it's no coincidence that the first time I actually felt like I was fishing, I caught one, a proper one. Not that the other one wasn't proper, but.
So what was the difference between the way you were fishing previously and on this session?
Well.
Single scale, a legendary carp.
What a cracking carp it was. It was a PB at the time. I think it was 44 something, which was it was elation, but something I don't think I quite enjoyed the Carp Park quite as much as other lakes for all the reasons that we've said. I was glad I caught one from there. I think I underperformed. I think I overthought it a lot. I was trying weird and wonderful rigs and just trying to do something too different. Even though like everyone's target is 1 fish a year from there, in a lake that held sort of 9 mirrors, I still think I had more opportunities than what actually happened. How
many chances were there on there a year, do you think? Total captures?
Well, this is the thing that I say, right? All the fish get caught every year, all 9 mirrors. Now, I fish lakes where a fraction of the fish, some of the fish have never been caught. Look at what we just spoke about, Colemere, that bullnose common is, it's only ever capture. All the people that had fished it for all them years. Now, on Yateley, like, single scale would start showing in front of the curly. It might get seen sporadically over a 2-week period. Then the next bite on the lake was single scale from the curly. How hard is a lake where you can predict what fish are getting caught from what swim? No, the fish are so recognisable and distinguishable that you could see it. That's single.
Had you ascertain this at the time as well? That this was...
Yeah, because you've got some of the country's best anglers on there, all talking about the same things. If there's a show at 3:00 in the afternoon, everyone's seen it.
Yeah,
everyone knows the spots had names. You've got Desi's spot in Desi's swim, and single's just shown on Desi's spot. The next bite is single from Desi's spot. If I've always said, if you had that lake to yourself without the pressure of other anglers, every fish gave itself away from the swim that it got caught from before it got caught. So that leads to say that an angler of above average ability is probably going to catch all the fish in the season if he had the lake to himself. Some people would take exception with that and saying you're talking absolute shite. But
so were you guys seeing a certain fish? So you see Heather show,
that's
and
exactly what
Heather's going to get caught next.
Well, a big fish showed in front of the dugout 3 times. We've mentioned Terry's name quite a lot in this podcast. I don't talk about Terry a lot. It just happens to have come up a lot here because it's relevant to these
crossed
early
paths a little bit.
Only in these early days, it seems to be. We're talking about my sort of early career, sort of 20 years ago, and did crop up. But one of the few times Terry left Trumpton's, apart from to go into the bars swim that day before Darrell had fish out of there, he caught heather from the dugout swim. Now heather that's a fish that I'd have retired happily, from that lake catching. And this is what I'm saying, where I think I underperformed on there, because I did have that opportunity. Dugout was one of the swims that I could have got in every week. None of the full timers had picked it. People did go in it if it was free and they only swim free or whatever, but a big fish, which I saw twice, but a big fish showed probably half a dozen times in front of the dugout swim, in the dugout water, and eventually Terry went and fished for it, caught it, and it was heather. So
what do you think is going on there? Because those fish are moving around the lake all the time. So they're showing on that spot all the time. But
I'm not sure they are moving around quite. Yes, they do move around the lake, but the smaller the lake, I think the more territorial they are. And they pick an area, and those areas might change. But yeah, they do move around. I remember Chile catching single. I think, who was one of the pellet flickers? A guy that had them all literally saw them all take his bait over a couple of years. Little John was it? I think he called. Remember Little John? I think it was either him.
Yeah, he caught heather in the winter. Was it winter time as well?
I can't remember exactly, but they were the legends of that lake that literally hand feeding the fish, training them. And I remember when Chile caught single, a lot of people were saying that whoever the pellet flicker was, I think it was Little John, he'd had him feeding the other side of the lake, and he'd been pulling his hook bait out of the way of single because he'd had it before, and he was kind of leading it up the bank away from his bait before he'd place it. Like literally, he had the right amount of pellets to flick. That's why they were called the pellet flickers, because they knew if they flicked 10 pellets it'd spook them, but if they flicked 8 pellets they could literally.
Well, that's the same as what you're saying about the dog in the room again,
exactly,
isn't it? It's
yeah.
the same thing.
And then I think the day Chile caught single, I think what they were saying is that it was either Fudgy or Little John. They turned single on so much, had it ravenous, but didn't fish for it, that it was in that switched on feeding mode. And then Chile had a bite the opposite side of the lake, and it was single. And I think what people were saying is that the fish had been turned on to feed, that kind of attraction type thingy, but they could have caught it, and then Chile wouldn't have caught it if they'd have fished for it, but they didn't because they'd already caught it. Not that makes any difference, these things happen around a lake unbeknown to us all day long, But
you think that they were quite territorial around those periods when they were.
It's a good point. I haven't really thought about that. Thinking about it now, I'm thinking no, that they did all move around, but maybe they just had a spot they liked feeding and kept going back to that spot until the spot was cleaned. Because it happened 3 times that I can remember where a fish that was identified as a certain fish heather from the dugout. We didn't know it was heather, it was just one of the big ones, kept showing, and then Terry eventually was like, no one else is going to fish for it, I'll go for it, and caught it, and it turned out to be heather, which was a repeat for him. We didn't know that was heather, but everybody saw it. It was seen, it'd show one day, and then maybe 2 days later you see another big fish on the same spot, and then 2 days later again, and somebody fished for it, and it was heather. Single from Curly or Desi's, I mean, that did it a few times over a week, and people knew it was single scale. They saw it, and then somebody caught it, and that was the next bite out the lake. But I found later when I went to fish St Ives, there's a big fish in there called the Fat Lady or the Grey Lady. I think Laney called it when he caught it. It was really big fish, upper 50, and that used to give itself away before it got caught. So you wouldn't see it for ages. It wouldn't get caught. People would start seeing it. It'd start off maybe for a week or two just putting its nose out, then it'd come out up to the gill covers, and by the time just before it got caught, it was launching clear of the water for a fish that size as well.
Well, Terry said as well in his book, didn't he? That was when he saw it show behind. Wasn't Dave stood in front of him and he saw it show? And and did he catch it quite soon after?
Or was it the other way around when Dave caught it?
It was Dave. It was Dave, wasn't it? Because it was, because of the Mere stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
But the lady was notorious for giving itself away before it got caught, and it'd build over a 2-week period. It might be in different parts of the lake, but it'd be basically saying, I'm nearly ready, I'll show a bit more, and it'd come out more and more till it was launching clear, and then it'd get caught. Yeah. And I'm thinking maybe it wasn't the exact same spot, or maybe it was a couple of different fish on Yateley, but basically, a lot of bites for the people that were looking every day, which was most of the syndicate then. And even if you didn't see it, like by the time you walk around for the afternoon brew sort of run, everybody did a lap before casting in the afternoons. And then, like, you knew what had happened. Yeah, single showed over there, and so over there, and heathers in the weed in front of the bars. Or everyone knew. You could see all the fish every day on there. Like, there was a lot of good anglers. There was a lot of big climbing trees where you could see the entire lake. You know, big 30, 40 footers, and you could find the fish every day on there. The difficult bit was getting anywhere near them because every swim was full, or certainly the main swim. So, you know, I had a bit of a debate with Rob Malin some years ago. He took exception to me saying this. Like, you compare the difficulty of somewhere like Fen Drayton, where 80% of the fish have never been caught in that lake, never will. You know, probably gone and dead now. But you do pretty much have that lake to yourself when you fish it. Like, it's not a busy lake. You know, you can go in almost any swim you want. You are not going to catch all the fish. You probably won't catch any fish in your first season or two. And then you go into somewhere like Yateley, where all the fish get caught 2, 3, 4 times a year, and you can quite often see the swim that they're going to get caught from before they get caught. Which lake's the hardest? You know, well, Rob Malin thinks he's made his career off Yateley, hasn't he? Let's be honest. You know, that whole complex has been virtually his entire income for most of his life. So he took exception when I said exactly this, which just seems logical to me. You know, which lake's the harder out of the two? You know, the lake where all the fish get caught every year, and you know what they are, and they've got names, and they give themselves up before they get caught. Like, they kind of tell you, I'm going to get caught from here.
You put a lot of logic into your fishing, don't you? You seem to be pretty clued up when it comes to remembering stats and everything about captures, and
there's patterns. There's certainly patterns.
You like patterns, don't you?
Yeah, we spoke about the moon phases a lot on the Carp Cast, and I've had a lot of conversations with other people about them. I use an app called Fishing Calendar Pro, which I know we've spoke about.
Yeah, so we got it up on the screen here. It's actually we're looking at today's weather. Actually,
today's a new moon.
Yeah.
I mean, the weather's crap, but as you can see from those lines, so the basic theory with the moons is in fishing, and it's not carp fishing; it's like all fishing. So there's 2 times when the moons control the tide. There's 2 times a month where the tides are at their strongest, and that's the new moon and the full moon. So we know that the moon controls water. It's got a gravitational pull. That's what makes the tides higher and lower. I think it was the Barbel fishermen. There used to be a website. I think it's gone now, but it was I forget what the name of this site, but it was a moon phase website where some guy who was a specimen barbel angler had worked out some patterns where he was catching the biggest barbel on the new moons. I think it was. Well, it was new moons and full moons. I remember having a lot of conversations. This is probably 20 years ago. I've had this app since probably since iPhones first came out. Like, it was, you got to pay for it. It's like a tenner or something.
Oh, it's it's just £2 a month or £3 a month or 17 quid a year. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. Well, as you can see, it's got the moon and the sun. So the basic thing is there's 4 periods a day where the moon crosses the sun. Which I think it's a 2-hour period. So that makes up something like 8 hours a day out of 24, which is 1/3 of a day. And I've looked at something like 80% of all the captures on some of these low stock lakes, where you actually know every time someone catches a fish, everybody knows who's caught it from what swim at what time of day. Like, it's much easier to follow on low stock lakes. Yeah. And it works out for a period that actually happens 1/3 of a day. 80% of all the captures have come within those periods. So that's significant. You can't ignore that sort of data. I actually, when I first got into this probably about 15 years ago. In fact, it would have been in the Elstow days I first started paying attention to the moons. I went back with all my friends, Roger Baker, and a lad called Jason, a few of us, that had all caught sort of significant big fish, you know, ones that you remember. So you remember the day, maybe you've kept the rig. I mean, you showed me the rig from the Parrot earlier. People remember these sort of things. We went back over about 20 or 30 captures of people that we know, and they were all on new moons. Every one of them were on a 3-day new moon period. Mr. Angry we spoke about before from the Manchester Park Lake. I think when I caught it, there was about 10 previous captures for a fish that was like 30 odd years old at the time then. They're all within 2 days of a new moon. Every single one of them.
Yeah, no, I can think of numerous fish that get caught on that. You reckon that there are so those periods during the day when when fishing it's potentially its best. Do you notice more activity on the lake and stuff then?
Without doubt. I've also noticed that on like a full moon period, I've noticed in the days leading up to a full moon, a lake that's been pretty dead, it just becomes alive. And there's a bit of a saying that commons come alive on the full moon. They say it's big fish weather for commons, and I'm still yet to be proved otherwise. Like I've seen it, and it was a lake in Bedfordshire. I forget the name of the lake now. It's free fishing for quite a few years. It had a couple of big commons in it. I know I never fished it, but I know people that are fishing it heavily, and they said like the mirrors were pretty active. The commons stayed deep. There was a set of snags that you could always see these commons. They stayed deep permanently in the commons, except for these couple of days, and they were never caught, these commons, by the way. They were seen regularly by everybody who went there. They were good, big uns at the time, 40s I think. Anyway, they came alive around the full moon. He said you could see them instead of being underneath all the other fish in the snags. They were the ones on top looking active.
Have you ever spoken to anyone that's got a reason for why commons are behaving differently to mirrors?
No, but I do believe they're a different species. I remember on St Ives again, which we might even move on to that, because that was that's still my UK PB, that fish. There in that lake, there was, Darryl might have said this better or not because I was on there at the same time as him, but there was either 17 fish or 19 fish in that lake in 30 odd acres. There were the two big ones, 40 and the 50. There were probably 4 or 5 30s, and the rest. There was one decent sized common, like it was a good 30, quite a long thing. Called the long common or something like that, and the rest were between 80 and mid-20s. Anyway, the commons would all come out together. So bearing in mind we're on a low stock lake, but probably only does 50 bites a year, so you can probably find out all of them 50 bites, because it's a syndicate of people. I think Jacko was on there when I was on there. Terry had just finished, Laney had just finished, but Darryl was on there. There was a few known anglers at the time on there, and then it'd be lady, pig, lady, pig, lady, lady, pig. Then there'd be 6 commons in a row with no other fish, and then the mirrors would start getting caught.
I can think of that as well, but I never gave it any thought until you just said that.
No, the commons would all come out together. So the next 6 bites, which might happen over a 2-week period, but 6 bites in a row on the lake would be commons, and then they'd vanish again, and then the mirrors would be caught again.
In those periods, so
well, I haven't actually gone back and looked over that, but talking about commons acting differently to mirrors, the commons would all get caught together. It doesn't matter if it was over a week, over a month, or over 2 days. All the commons would feed at the same time. I believe fish are feeding all the time, right? I think when we catch them is when they're actually dropped their guard enough
more
for
susceptible,
us. For us to stick a hook in it. So I'm not saying these commons weren't fishing the other days. I'm just saying they're feeding more finicky, or they're feeding deeper, or they're feeding it somewhere safer in snags. But I think we catch them when they hang themselves, when they're, as I said about the lady, showing more and more and more, until it actually was ready to be caught. And it's literally telling you, right, that's me done now. I'm so excited, turned on, whatever the trigger is.
Is that what happened when you caught the lady then?
No, but mine, I was in a year of partying. I don't think I'd fished at all. The year I caught it, I'd fished.
A year of partying, too.
Yeah. I've had about 30 of them. But I think I'd discovered Ibiza that year. I think I'd not gone to Ibiza because of Ibiza Uncovered on TV. It looked like everything I hated about like Brits abroad, and Ibiza's the absolute polar opposite of that, but you don't know until you go. In fact, 2 times I bumped into Dan sociably. We're in Ibiza. He's tapped me on the shoulder.
You will bump into him every summer. I think he's still he likes his holidays out there.
I was in the funky room in Pasha with Roger Bacon actually, and our respective wives and girlfriends. I was in there, and funky room's like a tiny little room. It's the size of this studio basically. Not that this is tiny, but it is for a club, And we're in there, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. He didn't have his glasses on, but I recognised him, but didn't recognise
Danny
him.
without his glasses on. Wow.
Yeah, he didn't have his glasses on, and he tapped me on the shoulder. He went, "You're Jamie, aren't you?" I went, "Yeah," and I knew him through fishing. He's going to hate me for this. I knew him through fishing, but I couldn't think who it was. Like it was just out of my head. So I'm chatting to him for about 5 minutes, trying to the cogs to click. Obviously, I'm pretty wasted.
He's a bit like Clark Kent then, really, I suppose.
It's
Down without his
exactly
glasses
like
on.
that. Yeah, that's the best way to describe him, Superman. Yeah, I'm chatting to him for about 5 minutes, and it got to the point where I'm not guessing it. I'm not going to get his name. I went, "What's your name again, pal?" And he went,
"Oh, I bet that went down really well."
He went, this look of horror come over his face. He went, "It's Danny Fairbrass." I was like, I sunk. My heart just sunk. I know I knew him. He didn't have his glasses on, and I'm twisted as well. And I've literally just run to Roger, grabbed him, went, "Danny Fairbrass is over here."
Really?
Just to kind of deflect the story. Anyway, I felt so embarrassed. He was with who is now his wife. I think they weren't married at that point. It was quite a long time ago. And then about 3 years ago maybe, I've gone to Ibiza. My friend was hosting some nights over there. He runs a firm called Clossick. And they were doing opening night of Blue Marlin on the Sunday, and then we were going partying at DC10. It was the opening weekend on the Monday. Same thing, with middle of the afternoon. We've gone in before it opened because the geezer that runs the place walked us all in for nothing, like at the start. So we're milling about while there's no sort of customers in there, just the DJs and things getting set up. It's quite a nice thing to see, do you know what I mean? And like walking around the studio and looking at a setup. Anyway, it's still not busy. I'm in there with all the Northern Angling Show lads, Spenny, Reedy, our girlfriends and stuff are all there. And we'd actually just done a week's fishing in France, that's right. And then we flew to Amsterdam to get to Ibiza for a party week. We'd done a week's fishing and gone for a party week for these opening parties. And same thing, literally somebody tapped me on the shoulder and went, "Jamie, innit?" And I looked round, it's Danny again. But,
Did you remember Umni last year, Tope? That same thing happened with Jason, who works
Right.
in product development. He goes on holiday with his missus, and he's in the swimming pool outside the hotel, and Dan just swims past.
He's keeping tabs on everyone. Isn't
Yeah,
he?
he must be.
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't need to do that at the moment. But
we
yeah,
spent the whole day with them at DC10. It was a good day, actually. It's a pretty good day.
He pops up a bit then, doesn't he?
I mean, I've seen him twice outside of fishing. You know, both times.
Well,
Both
Jason-
times he's tapped me on the shoulder in Ibiza.
Well,
Second time I remembered his name.
Jace texted me while he was on holiday. He said, "You're never going to guess who's actually in the same hotel as us."
No way.
Yeah. Oh, that's
He used
good.
to like the Pash Hotel. Danny did the first time I saw him.
Yeah.
The new big one that they built, 6-star jobby or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Anyway, I think that must have been one of the. It possibly was that year, because the first time I discovered the beef, I was like, "Oh my god, I've missed out for the last 10 years. It's not what I thought it was from the TV. It's like literally my mecca." And so I went 6 times that year, and never went fishing at all. Anyway, during that year, Roger he'd managed to blag himself a ticket for St Ives. I'd already done the previous year, which was the year Darryl caught it. And Roger was like, "You need to take me down there and show me." I had no interest in fishing at all that year. It's happened a couple of times in my life, you know, you get distracted or whatever, but you always get the buzz just as big, you know, when you go back. And we went down there. It must have been the last week in October. We went down there, went through the motions for 2 or 3 days, dusting my gear off. You need a couple of sessions anyway, don't you, before you find that you need hooks. You know, you've just not got any in your tackle box or whatever. So I was not interested in fishing. I've gone down there for a bit of a chill with my mate, a couple of takeaways and whatever. Anyway, on the last day, with 2 things, we saw the most amazing meteor shooting star thing that I've ever seen in my life. It was thick, you know, looking in the sky, it's like, oh, you could almost hear it whoosh across, and it was bright golden yellow, you know, burning, and even when it flamed out, you could still see the tail, you know, in the sky.
That's cool, that, isn't it? When they proper light up the
Oh,
sky.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
There was one in Cheltenham a few weeks ago. Then they found it? Really unusual meteor as well. Like they'd never found that rock before.
Oh, they got it on the deck afterwards.
They found it, yeah.
Oh, right.
That's
They found it,
Yeah, it crashed into someone's driveway, I think.
No way.
Yeah, in Cheltenham, yeah.
You'd be gutted if that went through the roof of your car, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
But the
Well,
rocks, yeah.
It was incredible. So we saw that on the last night, and then while we were packing up the next day, I had no intention of going back fishing. Anyway, we're looking across through the gap in the islands to this area called the Lawns. We seen a big fish, like very possibly the lady. Like we were 500 yards away, maybe more, on the other side of the lake, and it was badoosh. I was like, oh, that's enough to come back next week. Roger looked at me and he was like, you fancy it next week? I was like, yeah. After seeing that, yeah, of course. So it's amazing, even in a year that I wasn't bothered about fishing, like that's all it takes, that just stimulate you, turns on the fishing bug. I was prepared to come back the following week. Anyway, came back the following week, set up in the Lawns. The Lawns is called the Lawns because it's one of the few shallow places, gets the sun all day and it's weedy as hell. It's literally Canadian, top to bottom, 5 or 6 foot. Anyway, I fished 2 days, could not find a spot. You know what I mean? I'm fishing chods or whatever, just every method that I don't like doing. I'm a spot angler. I'm quite technical. I think about stuff. I find spots within the spot.
I've heard you say that before.
It's I like thrashing the water to a foam and making sure I'm on the best.
So what are you looking for?
Spot.
So a spot,
something different
in between a spot. So
yeah, if it's in silt like we spoke about before, I'm looking for a slightly harder bit of silt, something that goes down a tiny bit further. If it's blatant gravel, I'm looking for anything to indicate that the fish have created it, a slightly deeper bit. Sometimes, when you get used to fishing 3 rods on a spot, you keep finding that the right hand rod goes all the time, so then you end up moving the other ones across, and you end up fine-tuning a spot, I think. And spot fishing it's overlooked. I know people that are very good anglers that have never gone that deep into working a spot, but it's a skill within itself, and it's a skill that you might write off.
But I found with that as well that sorry to interrupt you, that the left-hand rod will always be the rod that will go. So you'll bring
even if you move them across,
and even if you bring it across, it's always the left-hand rod that goes.
Well, that's probably something to do with your line lay then. I've thought about this a lot over the years. It happens a lot less to me now. We use wrap sticks, because back in the day we'd pace it out, or we'd put a marker float out and then we'd cast 3 rods around the marker float, and then you'd mark it up with line elastic so you know where they are. Well, if you're fishing at 80 yards, 90 yards, on any distance above 30 yards, the angle we're looking at the float, I mean, I've been stood on lakes where someone's got a marker out. The lake Roger runs in Manchester, Deadman's, you're not allowed to fish the far bank. It's about 120 yards across, 100 in places, 130 in places. You fish like there's a bit of an old riverbed. It was a diverted river. There's a bit of an old riverbed like 3/4 of the way across, so you generally like try and find that. You put your marker out, then you can walk around the other side to bait up. It's only 20 yards out from the other side. I've been around the other side where someone's cast into their marker, and I've rung him up, and I've like, how far behind your marker do you think you're landing? And he's like, a rod length. 100% of rod length. I'm like, that's 3.5 rod lengths behind your marker. They're convinced it's just behind it, or it's 6 foot behind my marker. No, it's not. It's 2 rod lengths. Like, so it's very deceiving when you look at the angle that we actually look at. So back in the day before wrap sticks, I mean, I used to pace it down the bank. There was rocks and branches and all sorts of markers I had on different lakes. They're only relevant to me. Like I know that I've paced it out, but it's still not particularly accurate. But we would put a marker out, we'd put 3 rods around it that we thought were all tight, 1 left, 1 central, 1 to the right. We'd put elastic on the thingy, and then we'd fish to those markers for the rest of the session. So if what you're saying, it's always the left-hand rod going, and then you move the other 2, you presume the other 2 are the same distance, but they could be as much as 2 rod lengths distance. So when you move a rod over, you could be cutting off with your longest rod that you don't even know is 2 rod lengths longer than the other 2. You could be cutting off the other 2 rods.
Right.
So that's why that rod still keeps going and not the others.
Makes sense. You're
because
right.
it could be at different lengths. That happens a lot less to me now. Now we use wrap sticks because it's identical. The only difference is how hard you hit the clip. If you're using a 4-ounce lead on one rod and a 3-ounce lead on the other, and they're both wrapped to the same distance, they're actually probably a rod length difference, by the time it hits the deck, because there's 10% stretch in most lines. So if you're fishing at 100 yards, that's a 10-yard difference. You put a 4-ounce lead on a 3-ounce lead and hit the clip with the same pressure on both. They're in completely different places, lengthwise.
Yeah, I've seen that with. I mean, and we would never want to be consciously cutting a rod off, and I've obviously we've all seen that before, haven't we? Where it's if you're putting a line across another line, it's making that much of a difference, isn't it? But yeah, but mind you, saying that, I mean, I've done that with distance sticks as well. So, but
I can normally now move the spot around. Now I know I'm confident that I'm at the same lengths, and because it's such a devastating method, fishing your rods as tight as you possibly can, landing the spot in one place. But
do you, when you're doing that as well, if you're tramming your rods, do you just try and throw all three rods completely on top of each other and then sort the lines out afterwards?
I always aim at the same spot.
Yeah,
because it never lands on the same spot,
No.
and then I look, that one's over, and then quite often it'll be an hour later I've tightened them all up and tightened them just so I know they're all got every bit of bow taken out of it, and then I'll go, shit, I need to move that one over the right. Then you've got to remember which order you cast them in, so you're not going.
But at least you've got that
over.
Consistency with each all the rods. If you're aiming at the same spot,
Exactly. Yeah. I always aim all three at exactly the same spot, and then if there was the perfect braid and you could use braid on every lake, I don't think I'd ever use nylon again, just because of the inaccuracies with it.
The stretches.
You led around with braid with no stretch, and then if you're fishing a really weedy lake, you're finding, we call it a dustbin lid, but it's probably the size of this table. An actual hole. You try, finding that with a marker float, and you're lucky if you can actually get the marker up. Then you'll find the distance, then you wrap it out, and then you're going to put a nylon on it that's got 10 to 20% stretch in the line.
And wrapping your sticks up as well with nylon as well. It's
everything. I mean, I've learned to adjust. I know in my own head roughly, how far it's swinging back and everything. But the only way to be truly, truly accurate, if you're trying to be, is to use braid on all the rods, or use nylon on your marker rod.
Yeah.
That's the only other way to do it. But then obviously you can't feel. But back to the lady story. So I've gone back the following week. I'm really not happy with how I'm fishing. It's weedy as hell. I can't really find any spots. Like after 2 days of trying, there's not any spots there. And then it went clear and frosty. Like the temperature just dropped, and I was like, "There's no way the fish are going to be in this 4 foot of shallow water." I hadn't seen anything. Like it was a bit of a God. I should have gone partying. It's a bit of a waste of time. And I looked at the weather. Man United were playing in the Champions League. I'll never forget it. It must have been a Wednesday night. And we're going to listen to it on the radio. Roger came round for a curry. So we'd both kind of gone in this shallow area, and we were like, I was like, the fish are not going to be here. Like, not only had we not seen them, and it's a week-old information that we're kind of fishing off. It's from the previous week. I was like, I would not be here now if I was a fish. It's too cold. I was like, where's the nearest bit of deep water? Well, the next swim to the left is a swim called Dave's. It's almost like a different lake. You can put your left-hand rod in 15 foot and your right-hand rod in 3 foot if you want. Like, it's literally where the lake drops off deep from the shallow area between the islands. And I was like, if I was a fish, and I know the fish had been here in this weed, like, I would just go there into the deeper water. That's surely got to be warmer than where we are now. Roger did the same. He moved right. He moved to a different swim between the islands called Ladies Point, or Fatty's Point, we used to call it. And he came round to my swim we listened to the first half of the football and cooked curry. And then he was at half time, he was like, right, I'm going to go and listen to the second half in my bivvy, get warm, get comfy, because it's starting to get cold now. He hadn't got back to his bivvy when I've had a take, and it was the lady. On a year where I wouldn't have even fished if it wasn't for Roger getting a ticket and just wanting me to,
there you go,
show him around the lake. It was random. I've even got a Korda hat on at the time.
That's convenient, isn't it?
It was another. I've had a few county records over the years, being a travelling angler.
That's an awesome carp, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Fat lady.
58.10 it was. I think it is a funny story as well. It was 58.10. I mean, it was so much bigger than my PB. It was probably single scale, actually. It was probably 44 something. It was so much bigger. It was like I was just like, I'm never going to beat that again. I'm never going to get a Collingbrooke ticket or whatever to fish for the record. That was the third biggest fish in England at the time, and probably the only one you actually had a chance of getting a ticket on.
So you had the Brook. What was the other one?
I can't remember. There was a third one at the time that was 60, I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but I remember at the time.
But you said something interesting about statistics as well with that fish. You know, when you look at the amount of time that it's taking people to catch that.
Yeah, so I mean, I had this conversation with Daryl. I think Daryl, he had a couple more fish than me in total. I think I had 5 or 6 fish in the run up to this fish. I think this was my 6th or 7th fish out of the lake. I think I might have had 6 and Daryl had 7, but I'd done 65 nights. Daryl had done either 64 or 66 nights, and Terry Hearn, mention him again, I don't know why he keeps coming up, but it was his first bite, but after 60 nights. Like literally 3 anglers that sort of know what they're doing but fish differently, all took 60 nights to catch that fish.
So why is that then?
I don't know. I mean, I know at least 2 people that caught it on their first night on the lake. It was a first night fish for quite a few people. There's probably 10 people that have had that fish on their first night or first session.
That came out the most on that lake. That was the most caught.
It was between 5 and 10 times a year, that fish. It might have even come out 11 times one year I fished it. It's quite interesting actually. We were talking, it seems like a week ago now at the start of this podcast, where we were talking about some anglers being really efficient, and me thinking about efficiency doesn't catch you the big uns. Like, if anything, it probably harms your chances of catching the big uns, because I think the big uns act differently. So a really good example is a very, very good angler called Rob Farrant, who fished that lake a similar time to me. He never caught the lady. He, in a lake that had 17 carp in it, he probably had 40 fish out of that lake. In a lake that holds 17 carp. The lady and the pig together made up 50% of all captures, right? So most fish came out once or twice a year. The lady came out up to 10 times a year. The pig came out 5, 6, 7 times a year, right? So even on a year where they both do that, that's 17 captures. There's 17 carp, so take them 2 out. There's another 15 carp that get caught once a year each, right? So that's 15 captures plus the 15 of the 2 big ones. That's 30 captures a year, right? 50% of them are the 2 that you want. How can you catch 40 carp out of that lake and not catch either of them 2?
So what's the difference between the way you were fishing and the way Rob Farrant was
fishing?
They
were a lot better. He was a lot better than me, right? He'd see a fish show, which is a very significant sign on a lake like that, 30-odd acres with not many carp. He'd see a fish show. I'd be thinking about, oh, shit, I've got to pack my bivvy up, and then I've got to get a wheelbarrow, and then I've got to push it. By the time I'm still thinking about, I ought to move, really, he's already got 2 rods on it and had a bite. Like, just geared up for super mobile, super observant, super sharp fishing. He used to use little yellow pop-ups. We learned that fish never got caught on a yellow pop-up. Of all them captures of data, which we've got a lot, 10 captures a year for multiple years, that's a lot of data. Nobody ever caught it on a yellow pop-up. We all know that a yellow pop-up is probably the most efficient method of catching carp. He caught the ones that nobody ever caught, repeated again and again, fishing.
But they were decoying him away from the main prize.
Exactly that. And I said I learned that lesson young when my mate literally pub chucks it everywhere I wouldn't put a thing, and I'm catching 6 fish to his 1 on spots that I think I'm really smart for learning these spots. But he catches the biggest fish in the lake. Big fish act differently.
I know. I said to you as well. I know a friend that fishes the brook, and the same thing happened there. He spent a lot of years fishing there and caught basically everything in that lake about 4 times over.
Apart from the Collingbrooke fish.
Apart from the two-tone,
That happens a lot. But there's no bigger example on that. I mean, if there's 30 bites a year out of a lake and 15 of them are the 2 big ones, and you catch 40 fish and none of the big ones, like your style is not right for the big fish. As I said, a lot of people caught it on their first night. They loved bait. They loved lots of it, and it was more of a bait and weight fish. That fish, you put a sack full of bait in and sit on it. You probably got more chance of catching it than being the best angler on the lake. And don't get me wrong, Rob Farrant's one of the best anglers I've ever watched fish. It's frightening to see how effective he is, but it wasn't right to catch the easiest fish in the lake. And I've seen that happen a lot.
You've spoken to him about that since?
No, I mean, he was a bit of a funny one anyway. I never spoke to him
Did he take up running or something?
I don't know. I think he runs one of the Woolpack lakes, doesn't he? I'm sure he got the lease on one of those.
I know he's a bailiff, but I think he's a good runner now. Matt Pettit was saying.
Okay.
Yeah, but that'd be an interesting conversation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and there was other people on St Ives that fish the same, very efficient style. You know, I'm more of a lazy. I like to say it's a big fish angler, the bait and weight style, but it's I'm probably just not good enough to be as efficient.
I don't know. I'm a very
guys.
Inefficient angler, so maybe I'd be.
There we go.
I'd be all right. Hey, we've got this gift still here. All right,
yes.
Okay. Because normally we ask for the gift.
We're a little bit late on the old gift bit, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
we are. We didn't even get to Tatton Park or any of the good stuff.
God, blimey.
So, Jamie, you just have to come back, mate.
I'm happy to do that anytime. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, we've probably covered like 10% of.
But I've always. I listened to your podcast for years before we ended up doing this, so it's really good to get you on the show. I think it's like it was the right one to get you to come on and actually do a podcast with us.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you open the gift, then that's probably a good lead for that. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that a company as big as Korda acknowledge the fact that you're doing a podcast. Because of inspiration from us, we did the only podcast there was about. We had the market to ourselves for 3 years. Yeah, there's probably 20 carp fishing podcasts out now. I thought a gift should be wrapped. Does everybody?
I was just going to say,
normally?
I'd like to put it out there to future guests that I think they should all be wrapped. Yeah. I like the suspense.
They've started to.
They started to.
Actually, last week's guests were starting to wrap.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So they were. Oh wow.
Let's have a look. Hold it up. I'll tell you what. To this camera. Oh, look at that.
It's not quite self-promotion, but I just thought it was right that the first time I met you on a lake in your neck of the woods, you were actually listening to the Carp Cast.
Listening to Derek Ritchie on your podcast.
Go on, Si, for a closer one to your camera over here. A bit more that way. Go on. Perfect. Yeah, check that out.
Yeah, hat and a T-shirt. They're probably not clean, so I wouldn't try wearing them.
We asked you for a sentimental gift, and that's a sentimental gift. I really appreciate it.
We love that, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great gift.
I thought if you ever end up displaying them all, I've been having a look at the gifts that previous people have bought, rigs from Record Fish, and there's some nice stuff here. So I thought I'd have to make a bit of an effort. There's no girlfriend in my life ever had that much thought put into a gift. Ever.
No, really.
Sorry,
Emma. I remember just before we'd done this podcast, but just as we were preparing it, and you were talking about somebody else needs to step up and do a podcast, and we were in the midst of trying to get this one off the ground. I wonder what he's going to think of this one.
Well,
yeah, it's a bit different to yours, but it's.
I like the fact there's all these podcasts now. It's took a bit of pressure off us because, as you and I know, we've had quite a few sort of philosophical conversations recently, and in the early days, like when we had the only podcast, the people that listened to it, they were 50-50 split between wanting to hear general stuff and wanting to learn about how to catch more fish. And if ever we didn't talk too much about fishing in one podcast, we used to get complaints, and by the same token we'd get other people backing it up saying, I want to hear how he's getting on in Croatia or his life journey. I've become invested in what he's doing. But now there's a million podcasts out there that have got the technical stuff and everything. I'm not getting moaned at anymore if we actually go 3 hours without talking about any fishing. No one's moaning. So either no one's listening anymore or it's there's enough content out there now where you can actually choose. This is my favourite, or today I want to hear Simon Scott talk about the ins and outs of a carp's fart. I fancy.
It's a good variety of different guests, isn't it? It's getting a good variety, isn't it? And some people can tell stories, some people are a bit more scientific, and it's just having that nice spread.
It's having a balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I've enjoyed redoing our podcast again. It's it was definitely stale before we stopped. It was an effort to do them, and could have quite easily shelved it and never done another again. But having a little break and coming back to it, I've enjoyed it again. And thing is, we've had a lot of the guests already, so I've already done the like we've just gone through my sort of early fishing career. I've kind of already done that with a lot of our guests, so we can get into the finding more out about the person as opposed to
Yeah, I think that's important. It's about the people as well. So Mark Watson does the podcast with you as well. So,
Mark, we met on Elstow, on that Elstow 2. He never caught the model. He ended up catching the twin, which was what he'd gone there for. Like that dink strain is a fairly sort of special looking strain of fish. Well,
do you need someone with you to do this to keep you going with it? Do you find?
It definitely helps having somebody to bounce off, and on those seconds where you need a minute to think of the next thing, And Mark has a very nice dry sense of humour in. I've actually realised it's just literally all sexual connotations.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it took me 5 years. 5 years ago we
taken a while.
started it.
A light bulb moment at some point.
It is. It's just literally dry. But
have you spoken to Mark about this?
Yeah, it came up in the last podcast. We were talking about, I think, them poles now that everyone's using to, go deeper in the bush. I think it's called a fanny whacker, we call it, instead of a bushwhacker or something. It's like, I need some extra length to go deeper in the bush. It's just like, it just rolls off his tongue so easily. Actually, there's a pattern here.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, but he had a really good kind of dry side to it.
But actually, Mark's side of it, I remember, his swimming in those lakes and talking about doing his swimming and stuff. And there's a lot more to it than just listening about the fishing stuff. I liked hearing that stuff as well.
He went off fishing the last couple of years when he really got into swimming. I mean, he's got the fishing bug back again this year. But he's going to do an ice mile. I mean, there's less people done an ice mile than climbed Everest. So it tells you what a feat it is. It's
an ice mile. What's that?
I was about to say that as well. It sounds savage. Whatever it is.
Swim a mile. You swim a mile in, I think it's got to be 4.8 degrees or less, the water.
No.
It can kill you. It's a couple of years training to do it.
I'm not surprised.
He needs to train with that Wim Hof or someone, don't
Yeah, it is. I think that's what first got him into it, Wim Hof on Joe Rogan, the Iceman. Yeah, I think that's what first kind of started off with the cold showers. I mean, you must remember, we had a cold shower feature on the Carp Cast for a while. Where you had to record, you had to have the cold showers. I mean, it's good this time of year because it is pretty cold in the summer. It's cheating a bit, but that kind of noise everybody makes when you first turn the shower on cold. It's
When's he going to do this then?
He would have done it this year, I think, but obviously the swimming and everything stopped. Like the clubs, you can't just decide to do it on your own. It's like a world record attempt. It's documented, and some winters the lakes don't get cold enough to do it. It's not an every year thing, but I think he's planning to do it for next year.
So that'll be in this country, will it?
Yeah.
So like North Sea or somewhere a bit, or in a lake.
They have lakes, They have a lot of quarries and stuff. It's. I think the first stage to this is open water swimming. So most towns have got an open water swimming club. So you should have Mark talking about this really, but open water swimming clubs are where you start, and then they normally have a section. I think it's like I imagine it. I'm making this up now, but it sounds good in my head. But I imagine it being like when you're in the forces, if you want to go and do like special forces, what do they call it, selection, like they have to let you go and do it. I imagine like every open water swimming club's got this like little secret ice section. It's like
niche group of people.
You're going to go and do the ice mile,
yeah.
are you? Okay. But you have to train for quite a while, I think.
I can imagine.
You can't just go and do it.
So what are the plans for the rest of the year?
Fishing, hopefully. As soon as we can travel. I'm looking forward to getting back abroad. I'm actually got tickets booked on Lake Bled in May. Will I be able to go? I don't know. Obviously, I haven't had a house over there. I can sort of blag it as a not quite on a tourist visa. Should be able to get in. But at the minute, I mean, there's a lot of countries don't want English in at the minute. Partly Brexit, partly COVID. A friend of mine went to Spain last week. In fact, I was chatting with Dubby before when we were walking in. He used to live in Spain, didn't he? So he was saying the same thing, like they're just not letting English in the country at all for any reason at the minute. A friend of mine went last week. He was only using it as a stopover to get to Brazil. He couldn't fly direct from Brazil. His parents are dying of COVID and he wanted to go and see him. Found a route through Spain and got to Spain. They turned him away with a British passport. just wouldn't let him in the country.
Just number of cases still, and that stigma sort of
And
sticks.
he said it was Brexit. It wasn't
Brexit. Yeah.
COVID. It was Brexit.
Yeah.
Because we're not a European citizen. We don't have the legal right for automatic entry into Europe anymore. That they choose to let us in or not. That added to the fact they think we're all full of COVID because we had the highest deaths and highest numbers. That they couldn't have stopped us going in before. Now they can. So it's a bit of both, I think. But
the next year or so, with I said about importing stuff into the country and stuff like that. And my brother lives in Barcelona, and just trying to send stuff over to him, they just hold it in customs. Yeah,
and I think anglers fishing in France and stuff are going to find a few things wrong. It'll all sort itself out in time, but I don't think they're in a rush to sort it out this year because of the COVID factor and the fact that we've had the worst numbers. I don't think they're in any rush to get this red tape sorted so we can travel freely. I think anglers going to have a few problems this year, which for me, having a holiday company running trips to Slovenia and Croatia, it's not ideal. No, it's not good. So
fingers crossed. We'll see how things materialise. You'll keep everyone updated on the Carp Cast, will you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Jamie.
This is what I've wanted to do since we started, so I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
You're welcome. It's an absolute pleasure, and I love the fact that Korda are quite happy. Although I'm not with any company at the minute, I've been with Nash nearly 20 years. I love the fact that Korda are quite happy to have a guy that's with a rival company doing a rival podcast in there. It just shows the gentlemanliness is a better word for that. But you seem to be doing everything with decorum, so it's hats off to you guys as well.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for coming on the show.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.